Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back. It is a brand new episode of Bets and Banter, and you know what we're talking about today? It's UFC 307, and it is going down tonight, tomorrow night, whatever you want to call it. It's 12:07 here on the East Coast, so technically it's going down today, Saturday, and we're excited to break it down for you. We got two title fights on the top of the bill. Alex Poatan Pereira is defending his light heavyweight crown. He's doing so against Khalil Rountree Jr. We've got some fascinating trends to break down on that matchup. Can't wait to do so. Also, guys, the co-main event of the evening, another title fight. We got the women's Bantamweight title. It's on the line once again. Raquel Pennington defending against the former champion, Julianna Pena. I'm excited to break it all down, and you know we can't go it alone. On Bets and Banter, we got a great guest to break it down with us. My brother from another. It's been far too long. Billy Briz in the building. How are you, my man?
Doing good, man. Hope everything is well, Liam. It's been way too long. I was saying to you before. Glad to be back in the good graces, man. We're on your channel as well. I think last time I was on here, I was with you and Sean. So it's been some years, honestly.
Well, dude, we're happy to have you back. And I think that we've got a great card to break down, my man. We've got interesting fights all up and down. And a lot of these fights are meaningful to their divisions, right? Obviously, a couple of the early ones, maybe not so much. But as you start getting into the meat of the card, even on the prelims, there's a lot of good quality matchups to break down. And I'm excited to do it, my man. Hopefully, we can find some value for the people. We got a lot of sharp people already pouring in the comments section. So if you guys don't mind, drop a like on this video, get subscribed to the channel, because we're going to be going through all these fight breakdowns, and we're going to do it starting with the first fight of the night, my man. It's going down in the welterweight division. It's the old guys. Tim, the Dirty Bird Means. He's taking on Court McGee, and the Storm and Mormon is actually a wrestler named Matt Brown, but we're taking the name, we're giving it to our guy Court McGee, the Storm and Mormon, the only Utah representative on the fight card, and he's taking on the Dirty Bird Tim Means, a guy who's an old school wrestling coach. He's been around the game forever. He knows how to strike. He knows how to grapple. He can do all these things, but he's certainly up there in age. The performances haven't quite been there recently against these younger up-and-coming guys. So I'm curious first, my brother, we'll start with you. How do you feel about this matchup? Do you think there's anything worth betting on?
You can try to make an angle here. When we did the Dana White Contender Series live stream at Pub Sports, Danny was saying to me he was all over Court McGee, and it was at like plus 190 or something like that. And my book had like plus 200, and I was like, I guess I like it's just not a fight like big like we have like the show sheet that gets sent, and this was like the first fight in the show sheet, so I had to do some more research into this one. Both fighters do train in elevation. Court McGee, like you said, hometown fighter, Means trains in New Mexico. I wonder if he's still the high school wrestling coach. I remember the Kevin Holland fight. He was like high school wrestling coaching. Means is a brawler at heart. At the age of 40, though, he's lost 4 out of his last 5 fights. I mean, McGee's a solid wrestler. I feel like he could win minutes here. I mean, it's just, man, he hasn't gotten a finish since 2010. So I really don't like the finishing props on this fight. I think this fight could definitely go a little bit. While I think he's live in this one and he could have a cardio advantage on paper, I think he's going to need the judges a judge or two to kind of give him the little home cooking here. I like Court McGee by decision at plus 310, and I like fight goes the distance at minus 158.
Fair play, my man. We see this one just slightly different, and I do acknowledge, right? It's a massive amount of time since Court McGee has finished anybody, right? He's not the most dangerous guy you've ever seen, but I do think there may be a unique opportunity for him here to submit a guy like Tim Means, just because Tim has been a career mark to the submission. He's 5-7 career to the sub. And if you look at a guy like Court, he's attempted a few subs over the course of his career, just hasn't been able to put these guys away since his entrance to the UFC. So he got to the UFC. He submitted, I believe, his first 2 opponents in the UFC, performance of the night bonus type deal. And since then, it's been unanimous decisions when he wins, and typically, decision losses as well on the other side. You look at a guy like Tim Means, I think he's live to win this fight by knockout. He's the more powerful guy. Neither one of these guys, I would say, is very durable at this point in their career, but I'd say the guy who's less durable is Court McGee, because if you look at his early portion of his career, he was still getting knocked down back then. So I think that when you look at this kind of matchup, like, there's some inherent volatility with 2 older guys going out there. But I think that if there's not a finish on the McGee side, in the, like, if he doesn't get finished in the first 3 minutes, and if he doesn't finish Tim Means, then I think this fight is going to go the distance more often than not. I do still think Court is a live dog here. When I think of how he could win the fight, I think number one, he could eke out a decision here. He goes out there and goes competitive on striking volume with almost everybody he fights, even guys that he loses to. But occasionally there's a knockdown in the mix. He gets taken down by a guy like Sean Brady, things like this along the way. But he's the kind of guy where he typically competes pretty well if he doesn't get starched. And so I don't really expect him to get starched here. And I'm like, okay, if he's not going to get knocked out at that high of a clip, then it seems like a fight that he could win, right? On paper, I think the crowd will be behind him. I think he could go take him down. I think that Tim Means, his best work is typically in the first 6 minutes, 7 minutes. The other thing I'll note, and the reason why I do think there's some submission equity here, is you look at a guy like Daniel Rodriguez. It's not like he's a bad grappler, but he's not really a proactive grappler, right? That would not be his A approach. But I think his only submission win in the UFC is against Tim Means, right? And basically, the habit I have noticed about Tim Means, and it's the reason I bet Kevin Holland by sub at a similar price when he fought him. Granted, Kevin is a little bit more dynamic with his submissions, right? No doubt about that. But it was the same premise, right? Which is just, if this guy gets hurt at all, he's going to shoot a bad shot from far away. If the guy gets too tired, he's going to shoot a bad shot from far away. And I do think a guy like Court, he's a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He's very aware on the ground. And I think his cardio, even though it's 39 and 40, I think it's slightly better. So for me, those are the things that push me towards Court McGee being the money line side or passing on this fight. And I do think there is some equity in the sub here, but otherwise, man, I'd be rooting for you. I'd be rooting for Court McGee decision here. Those are the two methods I think are most live, the sub and the decision. I don't think he's got power in his hands. I don't think he's going to find that at this point in his career,
I didn't bet the sub specifically, but I will say the best angle that I saw in this fight was in daily fantasy. You know how in like daily fantasy, a lot of the price tags come out like in the beginning of the week and stuff like that. And it's done by like computer generated like models and stuff like that. So Tim Means opened up at minus 250 when the pricing came out for this slate. And looking at it, he's only $11 on FanDuel. It's a very cheap price tag. Like that translates to like $7,200 on DraftKings. So if you're playing on FanDuel this weekend, I would definitely play Court McGee as like a big dog. I just got to grab a water real quick.
Absolutely, brother. Take your time. So without further ado, guys, we'll move on to the second fight on the card. And this one is going down between former champion Carla Esparza. She's made us some money on this show. We're fans of Carla Esparza, but she's taking on Tecia Pennington here. And I noted on Twitter, if you guys are not following me on Twitter, then I encourage you to do so because I try and give out helpful information throughout the course of fight week. One thing I noted is despite the fact that she's just 3-2 in her last 5 fights, Tecia Pennington has outstruck her last 5 opponents by no less than 26 significant strikes. So she kind of got hard done by the judges in terms of what you'd expect from an average outcome. When you outland somebody by 26 significant strikes, typically you're winning that fight, right? And so it's the kind of thing where she's had some bad results, some bad runouts in terms of how things have played out. But the reason she said she didn't retire and she still feels confident about pursuing her career is she said, I still feel like I'm winning these fights and I feel like I'm going out there and doing my job. And so it's her motivation to continue, right? On the other side, you have a Carla Esparza who's basically saying like, there's no outcome of this fight that could get me to continue this career. I'm done. Thanks for the memories. It was great while it lasted, and I'm out of here. And those are the fighters that I don't really like to get behind. I don't know that Carla Esparza has shown a very spirited effort in either of her last 2 performances. She happened to win a title against Rose Namajunas. I had 10 units on the fight. Bro, I watched the fight through my hands. They didn't fight at all. I don't know if they were play acting or if they had a little signed agreement in the back. She gets married 2 weeks later, nary a mark on her face because they didn't fight, dude. And I've seen, 2 kindergartners hurt each other more, in a 30-second confrontation than these 2 trained professional athletes did over the course of 25 minutes. So for me, I kind of throw that fight out of the sample. And then what did we see against Zhang Weili? I thought Zhang Weili would win the fight. I thought she would win it by decision. I thought she would, out-wrestle, out-position Carla over time. I thought she'd be too physical. I didn't think she was going to expose her grappling and embarrass her, right? I didn't see that coming.
That fight was wild. I didn't think she was going to finish her like that. That was crazy. Wasn't that like a second-round finish?
Yeah, and then think about Amanda Lemos survives just fine after she got submitted by Jessica Andrade. So, you don't want to play too much MMA math, but, man, the bottom line for me is like, I did not see anything about what Carla was doing there that was like, yes, like I'm excited to get behind her in her next fights. For me, she seemed like a retiring fighter. She seems like a fighter on the other side. And I could point to examples in her prime, in her championship years, where she got hit a few times and she decided maybe this isn't for me right now. Think about the Joanna and Jacek fight. Did she get knocked out? Did she get hit with so many shots that she couldn't continue? No, she was getting beat up and she decided like this ain't for me right now. I'm thanks anyways, like checked out of here. And for me, that's a sign of something that can happen again, especially when the motivation is zero. Think of a guy like Ali Quinta, can go 5 rounds with Khabib Nurmagomedov, and he decided he was ready to retire before the fight with Bobby Green. And what did he do? He took one punch to the chin and he laid down and he said, thanks anyways. I'll take the check and I'll get out of here. And so I'm just saying, like, this fight is like minus 700 or something to go the distance. It's like, good luck with that. Because I'll just say the Carla Esparza I've been seeing doesn't look like a woman who's all that interested in fighting for 15 minutes. Like, could she? Yeah. Tecia's not a good finisher, just like Court McGee. But is she, more motivated, I feel, in this fight? Is she training in a championship setting with her wife as opposed to Carla who's doing, I don't know what? It just doesn't seem to me like a great spot for Carla. As a guy who's max better at plus 185 in the past, even in that fight, like, was it a great bet? I mean, I guess because it was a 50-50 fight, but was it a bet that you felt great about? No. I've made plenty of bets where I'm like, that was the right side to be on. I don't even know. Like, that just felt like a fixed fight that I happen to be on the right side of. God bless, happens to, be lucky than good on that outcome. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this fight, man. Any betting value here?
Maybe it's the name change or something like that, but I don't know, man. I got to go through the X's and O's about this because this feels like a spot that ideally, like when you first think about your card, you don't really want to dump on a women's strawweight fight on a pay-per-view. But I think back and I look at, when you track your stuff, you start looking at trends and stuff like that. And it's always like these pay-per-view fights that end up like betting these women fucking fights. Like Casey O'Neill was a big bet for me over the summer. And this just feels like a spot where I think I might have to dump on Pennington here, man. Like, we might have to go Pennington up here. And I feel more confident in Tecia than I do Raquel just because of the training situation. I think that she's going to benefit from the whole entire. She just came back from pregnancy in her last fight versus Tabitha Ricci, and she was dominating the early portions of that fight. But then it kind of went to a questionable split decision. But then I feel like those rounds that she's getting in with Raquel is like literally like the perfect type of scenario that you would want to have for this camp. And there's a lot of questions with Carla Esparza. I mean, she's coming back from pregnancy. Obviously, she's more worried about being a mom, and why not fight out your last contract, go get paid. And I think they're going to do a nice little gentleman's agreement here. I think Tecia's going to, dance around the cage, pot shot a little bit. I mean, it's not like Tecia's knocking out anybody in the cage here. So I feel like she has all the advantages in this fight besides the wrestling, but it is women's MMA. So I do see this one going the distance. Kind of hard with it being like 12 o'clock at night before the pay-per-view to like really get in. But one angle I think I might have to get in here is this round 3 by decision here at minus 145. Kind of what you alluded to a little bit. We kind of seen Carla Esparza. I could definitely see her being like in round 3 after she gets done going to the corner after round 1, and like round 2 she sits back down again. She's like, honestly, man, fuck this shit. I'm so cool. Or if there's a finish in this fight, I think it's going to have to be through volume. Like, it's going to have to be later on in this fight. Round 3 decision by Tecia Pennington, maybe even round 3 alone for Tecia Pennington if there's a finish in this fight. I don't think it's going to happen early. I think the totals are pretty dictative of like, you can say what you want. Minus 600, fuck it, dude. I definitely think this shit's hitting the distance. So, I mean, do what you want with that. But if you're like one of those people that do like fucking 10 leg parlays or something like that, I would rather bet fight goes the distance in this fight than some of these chalkier money lines that we'll talk about later on in the card.
Yeah, I definitely feel where you're coming from. I think there is marginal finishing equity. I will say I went back and watched Tecia's only submission win in the UFC, and she was able to just hop on the girl's back and be pretty opportunistic with a rear naked choke. And frankly, like, I just don't think that UFC level fighters should be getting submitted with that rear naked choke that Carla Esparza got submitted with. It was like, especially a wrestler, right? Like she got her arm caught in like a weird, like crucifix position and had no answers, didn't scramble very much, and just ultimately didn't offer as much resistance as I would have liked to see. And I think that was in round 2. So I'm not trying to equate Zhang Wei Li and Tecia Pennington in any way, right? But what I am saying is like we saw Amanda Lemos go out there and go 5 rounds with her. I think part of it was like Carla Esparza not having her heart in the game. And I think we saw that against Joanna Jędrzejczyk when she checked out back in the day and gave up in round 2. And the same thing I thought materialized against Zhang Wei Li. So when you talk about motivation, you've got one girl who seems like she wants to get some revenge on Carla Esparza, who talks some shit about her, right? And then meanwhile, Carla's just like, yeah, I'm here for the check. I'm here for the ovation of the crowd. I'm here to take the gloves off, do the whole thing. Maybe they play a promo package like Michelle Watterson as I get carried out of here. And that's it. And that for me is where I see this rubber hitting the road. I agree with you that Tecia is.
And that's what makes me want to fucking dump on the fight, Liam, is the Michelle Watterson one. Like, I was very invested. I was like, boom, retirement fight, boom, let's hit it. And like, it feels too good to be true. Why is this in the line not north of minus 200? Situationally, this should be like minus 230, 240. Like, it kind of reminds me a little bit of a situation of the Dana White Contender Series a couple of weeks ago with that one girl that was coming back from pregnancy. She was like some world champion wrestler or whatever, and the girl that she was fighting just ran through her like bread and butter, and it looked like the easiest minus 112 that you ever bet in your life. And sometimes betting on fights is just like you don't want to sweat every fucking bet that you have. That's not betting. That's not fun. Like sometimes betting is betting a cigar game, and you just move on to the next day.
Yeah, and the thing I'll note here is both these women are very profitable in their current odds range. So if you look at Carla Esparza, she's done well as an underdog, 6-3 in the UFC for a 79% ROI. But on the other side, one of the strongest trends on the card, Tecia Torres as a favorite, 8-1 in the UFC for a 20% ROI, average odds minus 277. So for most of her career, she was a huge favorite in her fights. And now she's gotten to the point where she's been fighting some younger women, things like that. And so she hasn't been a favorite, right? She's been a dog against Tabitha Ricci, a dog against Mackenzie Dern, but her last few times out as a favorite, except against Marina Rodriguez, she was able to go out there and get the win. So I think that she is a potential play as well if the line continues to come down. However, I just think for me, it might be a fight I keep my hands clean of. It's a weird fight, and I think both women are a little bit past their sell-by date, but I think Pennington's game just translates more to the modern UFC, and I don't know that Carla Esparza's takedowns are going to be there. So if she's not getting the takedowns, I think she's going to have a very hard time winning the fight.
Yeah, 1,000%. This one just comes down to the volume. Like, honestly.
Yeah, and like I said, she's outlanded her last 5 opponents by no more than 26 significant strikes. And then next up, guys, we got a light heavyweight fight. It's Ovens St. Preux taking on Ryan Spann. We'll have you start us off on this one, Billy. How do you feel about this matchup? And do you think there's any value to be had?
Yeah, this fight was supposed to be a bout that was supposed to take place last month. OSP had to pull out of the fight due to a sickness. I kind of think the situational and the locational change does kind of favor him in this matchup. Spann's a dangerous fighter with good boxing and strong wrestling, but his durability and cardio is kind of what just stunted his career just in general. He takes punches pure, like very bad. He gets hit at distance, and his cardio kind of falls off and gets worse. OSP's a tricky veteran that's been able to kind of stay around the promotion with some toughness, being a tall, rangy striker. And I'll say I like his submission game. It looked like his career was kind of trending towards being over with the Kennedy win, though. Kind of was very impressive. I had a Kennedy and some parlays and stuff like that, and I was pretty pissed off. He showed that he still has something in the gas tank. He is one of the few African fighters on the roster. I have my concerns with Spann. He's the younger, more dangerous fighter on paper, but how does this fight if this looks extended in altitude? And I definitely think it could be. I kind of like OSP here on the money line, and I think he can win a bullshit-ass decision where Ryan Spann just falls off the cliff, and then OSP just ends up having the better numbers after 15 minutes, and we're all asking, how did we bet Ryan Spann again at chalk, and he busted again?
Yeah, I mean, my principles would say, like, there's no way you could bet Ryan Spann at minus 250 virtually against anybody, right? You look back at like a result like the Sam Alvey fight. How? Like, he has every physical advantage you could possibly imagine over Sam Alvey, and he wasn't able to put him away. And then he's going to a very close competitive fight there. He did get rocked in that fight as well. I think his chin is suspect. So for all those reasons, like, I would not be thrilled about playing him at a chalk price almost ever. However, when you look at a guy like Ryan Spann, he wasn't favored for a while. He went on a dog run. Like, he was a dog in all these fights. He won a bunch of them. So then you're like, damn, like, maybe we've underrated this guy, right? But now it's back to that pendulum swing. And now it's back to, he's a huge favorite again in these fights. And listen, I think OSP got a new doctor because he just had more cardio and better durability than he had shown in other fights. But I also think Kennedy Nzechukwu is a very hit and miss fighter. I don't think he brought very much to the table that night. I thought it was a really bad showing by him, straight up. And so when you look at what Spann brings to the table, he can knock people out early. And the thing I think that's special about his game is his guillotine. He has a really good guillotine choke, maybe the best in the light heavyweight division. And, when these other guys go to guillotine OSP and get Von Prue choked, I think it's possible here. Again, it's like plus, 360 or something for the fight to end by sub. But Ryan Spann to win by sub is like plus 650. Sub one is like plus 1,500. I think that's his best path to victory in most fights. Like, obviously knocked out some chinny guys before. And I would say OSP does qualify. He has been chinned in the first round by guys that you don't think of as power punchers, especially as he's gotten past his 38 years of age mark. However, I again just think of a guy like Ryan Spann is very opportunistic with his submissions, and he doesn't go for, a guillotine and pull himself into guard. A lot of people say he pulls the guillotine. Not really. He goes for a high elbow guillotine from standing. And if you do that, there's not really an opportunity for the Von Prue choke, right? You're just choking somebody, and like with his length and his size, he's like hanging them off the ground. Really brutal choke. So I think that is my potential angle on this fight, would be to just sprinkle really small on Spann early submission props. Because otherwise I think, the ways I would look to play this would be a contrarian goes the distance, and OSP, because I just think he could go out there and out volume this guy. I agree with your points about Spann's cardio. I don't think OSP has good cardio, but I think Spann has horrific cardio in extended fights. When you make him work, or if you hit him hard, he just does not respond the same way. And I think his power diminishes as well later on in the fight. I bet Bogdan Guskov, everybody was ready to
that was
down
great
the river.
money, dude. I hit the round 2 prop plus 700. That was like season. Like, it makes me want to go back to it, because I mean, these fights are in altitude. This is the last fight of the early prelims rolling into the ESPN card. I mean, I don't know, man. I also thought fight to start round 2, if you're looking for a chalky price tag. How do you feel about that, minus 168, or do you think Ryan Spann just finds a finish early?
My problem with that bet is that I think both guys are live to finish in round 1, because I think neither one of them has a good chin. So if you look back, Spann got cleaned up in his last fight, and honestly, they let him take too many shots against Bogdan. Nice. So his chin could be diminished. It was already not good. Then you look at OSP, the guy's getting flatlined by my boy Felipe Lins. I called that, by the way, KO1 in my article. I called that, but I was still surprised at how it looked. Like, it was a bad look, right? The guy is just not taking a great opening round shot. So those are the reasons I would probably avoid that. But I wouldn't be like jumping on the under with confidence either, because it's the kind of fight where if it ends, I think it ends in the first round. And if it doesn't end, then it probably, like in round 1, it probably goes to distance, because both guys will probably then go into, pick away at a jab and try and win the round type mode. And I don't know that you could trust either of them to step on the gas pedal in an extended fight, especially at altitude. Like, that would be very dicey, I think. I think they would both just go into competitive outside kickboxing mode.
My bad. The Syracuse game just finished, but yeah, no, I definitely do agree with you. The only thing that like really concerns me is, like, how do you just get in on Ryan Spann? Because everybody was betting the sub prop in the last fight against Bogdan Guskov, and like, look how that worked out for them. And I don't know, man. OSP isn't as dusty as I thought he was. He was on my fade list And I learned my lesson real quick. And if Kennedy Njoku was fighting Ryan Spann, I'd be betting the shit out of Kennedy. So it's like I don't know.
Dude, they're teammates, and I would almost guarantee you that Ryan Spann whoops his ass in the gym. I could be wrong about that, but I would almost guarantee that when there's not the pressure of like people watching and things like that, Ryan is a natural athlete. I think he hits hard as fuck. His jab is clean. Dominic Reyes just went on this nice rebound win, right? And I was like thinking to myself, like, he has a chance to win this one, right? Against Jacoby. But you look back at the Spann fight, dude. Spann caught him, knocked him dead. And he can also, he did it to Kutalaba, put him in that choke early. So for me, Spann is a very dangerous guy. And I think he's a very confident guy a lot of the time when he starts a fight. It's just that as the fight gets going, if you start hitting him and things like that, we know that he can make bad decisions. He can get into his own head and quit. Guys, he knocked out Johnny Walker like 3 times and still found a way to get finished in the first round. That fight is unbelievable. I bet Johnny Walker there, and 3 times I was ready to tear up the ticket. I was like, oh, he's asleep. And then he wakes back up and knocks him out. I was like, Johnny! Crazy. Arguably the best win of Johnny Walker's career, Khalil Rountree getting a main event title shot here this week. And, when he went out there against Spann had him on ice skates. So Spann is dangerous enough to beat anybody in the division, but he's also, in his own head enough to lose to anybody in the division. That's why minus 250, not enticing. Finish props early, always a little enticing.
The last thing I wanted to say, little food for thought, was originally when this fight was scheduled that specific weekend, I thought the script was very strong for Ryan Spann. It was Superman Day on a Kobe card, and it was a very lackluster Apex card. And then we just like OSP just randomly pulls out. It's just like, and then they reschedule the fight for this one. It's just like, I don't know. That situation was very, very, very strong. This situation is not as strong as that situation. So that just makes me lead to feel like this is a parlay buster.
Fair enough, man. It's definitely an option, right? When you look, both these guys, negative striking differentials, sub 50% striking defense at light heavyweight. What does that mean? They could easily get cracked on the chin. I could go through and show you guys that they've both been knocked down myriad times in their UFC career, but just trust me when I say that's true. And then Ilir Latifi, a literal fire hydrant of a man, was able to stuff Ovince St. Prue's head down and choke him with the guillotine, lift him off the ground with it. So before you tell me it's impossible for Ryan Spann, folks in the chat, go watch these fights. Go look back. OSP, despite the fact he's got that one cool gimmicky move, he can be exploited in the grappling at times when he bends over a little too much at the waist. And I do think Ryan Spann, big, strong guy, going to try and be active in the clinch, going to try and land big shots. And if he makes a mistake, if he shoots from too far out, if he tries to engage in the clinch with this guy and gets his head shoved down, I just think it's going to be wraps, man. That high elbow is money, money, money. And I think he's got 12 submissions as a pro, and it's like 90% guillotines, right? Like standing guillotines. He's got one move, just like OSP, except he's 33 years of age. So that's the one thing that I think gives him a slight advantage here,
Yeah, 1,000%.
The dynamism early.
It's the reason why I haven't dumped on the money lines. Just like, this is one of those ones like, I'd probably just let this one go by the wayside here.
Fair play, my man. I think it's the kind of fight where right guy's favored, but the price is wrong. It's just too aggressive on the favorite. So do you want to get caught out speeding, looking for the underdog that you don't really know if he's going to cross the finish line? I think that's why it's easier to pass on this one, but it's certainly a compelling fight, my man. Light heavyweight violence, I'm expecting there. Next up, brother, we got a middleweight contest, and this one's going down with Ihor Potieria taking on Cesar Almeida. My man, crazy to see a guy who is, 6 fights deep in an MMA career and was an underdog throughout most of his, Dana White Contender Series and UFC run, now get installed as a minus 400 favorite. He's taking on a guy who's definitely struggled out the gates in the UFC. I think 2-4 so far in the promotion for Ihor Potieria. But need I remind people, he was fighting at 205 pounds, I believe, when he lost to Nikolai Negomereanu. He was also competing at 205 pounds when he got beat by Adolfo Balato. And guys, remember, Adolfo Balato was nearly finished in that fight. He was on death's door in that fight. Poteria was trying to close the show on him. He was trying to throw, and he gassed himself out looking for the finish, and then got finished by Bellato. Bellato went zombie mode. Like, shout out to him, but he had to dig really deep to get that win. So I say all that to say, you look at a guy like Ihor Poteria, I'll just tell you guys, for me, on a pure system basis, this is a dog or pass based on everything I've learned over the years about MMA. I'm not saying he's going to win. I'm not saying you have to bet this way, but I'm saying, as a guy who picked Cesar Almeida on Contender Series against Lucas Fernando, as a guy who, picked him against Roman Kopylov, I just think you look at this and it's a little price prohibitive, right? Because he's 36 years of age. That's ancient, right? It's ancient for the division. He looked to have no semblance of a ground game once he gets put flat back on the ground. I think he has a decent understanding of what to do in the clinch work against the fence. He had natural clinch instincts when he fought Alex Pereira in kickboxing all the way back in the day, right? So the guy knows how to clinch. And you saw that against the Dylan Budka fight. He tried to push him against the fence, and then Dylan Budka was the one who got beat up. Dylan Budka was the one who wore it worse after 7 minutes of them being against the cage. But I think that when you look at a fight like this, Cesar Almeida should be favored. He is the more dangerous guy with the hands. He's a knockout threat in this fight for sure. But Michel Pereira is a very experienced UFC guy. He's had a million fights inside and outside the UFC, and the guy has a submission threat that you cannot ignore. Before that fight, I said Michel Pereira by sub at plus 575 is the play to click on if you're on this fight. And then he goes out there and submits him in like 45 seconds. Is Cesar Almeida going to do that? Like, anything's possible. It's mixed martial arts. But is that something you expect? Is that something you'd project? No. So, okay, you have Poteria, who's had 27 professional mixed martial arts fights. He's won 7 of them by submission, most of them over terrible guys on the regional scene. But it shows at least that he's been in these fights. He's been in grappling situations. He knows what to do there. And you have a guy on the other side who just got dummied by Roman Kopylov, who himself came in as a kickboxer, and need I remind people, was submitted by Carl Roberson when he got to the UFC. Okay? So don't try and sell me on Roman Kopylov as the second coming. He's a good fighter. He's solid. He's made improvements over time. I've sung his praises at times, but we've seen his limitations. He gassed out in 7 minutes against Fluffy Hernandez. We all saw it. He's dangerous, but he can be gassed out. He can be counter wrestled. He can be counter grappled. And he easily owned this guy in the wrestling and the grappling throughout most of the fight. Used it to his advantage. And so I think to myself, if it's a pure striking fight, you definitely favor Cesar Almeida. But it's still two guys at 185 pounds punching and kicking each other in the head and neck and chest. And I feel like the 28-year-old shouldn't be completely counted out because he got beat by Michel Pereira, who would be a substantial favorite against Cesar Almeida. Right? Like, am I crazy? Like, he would be minus 300 at least. And he would go out there and submit him in the first round. Like, 100%. Like, yeah, so that just to me seems a little crazy, but maybe I'm off one here, brother. Correct the course here. Tell me why the duelist is taking a dirt nap.
Yeah, I mean, shouts to Gorilla. Gorilla worked for this dude since I was in college. Him and Alex Pereira have the same lawyer. So, like, this is before Alex Pereira was even in the UFC. So, like, we're really tapped in. He gave me a call. We were talking because I used to live with him in West Virginia last year. He gave me a call in the beginning of the summer, and he said, remember that kid that you bet on the Contender Series a couple years ago, that Almeida kid that you're saying that fought Alex? He's over at Glover's gym and stuff like that. I'm telling you, man, his grappling is getting a lot better. It's not the same shit from the Kopylov fight. And he does not bet MMA. He bets baseball and like other shit like that. So for him to give me that little nugget there, and then I see the Instagram a month or two later, and it all adds up and stuff like that. This screams like a dump spot for me here. This is going to be his third time fighting this year at the age of 36. I feel like the time is now or never in his career. If you look at Dana White's Instagram, when Dana White does the little thing for the card for the weekend, this is the first.
If you don't know, now you know.
Yeah, if you don't know, now you know. This is the first fight that he talks about after the championship fights. If you look at Pereira, he's been knocked out in 3 out of his 4 losses, and that's really due to just his striking defense. He's just willing to get in there and just exchange in the pocket. This is just a perfect opponent to add to a highlight reel knockout here. I ended up betting Cesar Almeida by knockout in rounds 1 or 2 at -110. A little bit chalky, but this just seems like a dumb spot for me here. I'm not going to overthink it.
My hesitation would be, I think he can submit him, especially based on the intel that you just gave, right? Which is like he's been working on the grappling, trying to improve it. Like the blueprint is kind of been laid out too. Like if you could hurt this guy Pereira, he actually has a pretty good shin. Like almost everybody's had to standing TKO him. They'd have to beat him down on the ground, but it was Pereira who just like hurt him and then grabbed his neck instantly and was able to get him out of there. And for me, that is something that is at least an interesting note for our guy Almeida. And I think it's like 20-1, right? So obviously I wouldn't be looking at it if it's 5-1 for, a kickboxer or something like that. But at 20-1 against the guy who's coming off of a rapid submission loss and could get club and subbed again, I think that that's at least a interesting look. And how many times have we seen it, man, where everything points to like this person has the grappling advantage, this person has the striking advantage, right? It's just like so clear on paper. Think of the Contender Series the other week, right? This guy who's like a stand-up, karate guy goes out there and drops Bailey Schoenfelder and then chokes him out at 35. Like it's literally 35-1.
Bailey's always been a fraud, though. Bailey's always been a fraud since the Bellator days.
I hear you. And by the way, I mentioned that fight on my breakdowns. I still thought he was going to win. I thought the other guy was even worse. I think that guy is a fade in the UFC, personally. But in any case, it's just the nature of fighting at 205 and 265 pounds. You get clipped on the chin one time, fight's a wrap for you, right? He was going for takedowns while he was already on Dream Street. And so the fight was not going to go his way. I look at a guy, you pointed it out, man. 4 losses, all 4 inside the distance in the UFC. So like you said, 3 by knockout, but also 1 by submission. He has been a walking highlight reel loss. So I get why he's the dog here. But for me, I always think, do you have the skills to cover this if something goes wrong, right? And I think of an Arman Sarukian against, what's that guy's name? The
but
Brazilian guy.
Cesar doesn't have the cardio advantage. He has the cardio, durability, striking, volume. The only thing he doesn't have is grappling. But is
his cardio going to be elite at altitude at 36 years of age? I think that's at least an open question.
If he's at Glover's gym, that shit's tapped in. Like that, his cardio. Like I'm not hot. If there,
all I'm gonna say is Yuri Prohashka pace grappled Glover Teixeira.
I'm just saying, if there is a gym for a kickboxer to go to learn how to defend takedowns and to transition from kickboxing to MMA, it is Glover Teixeira's gym. Just look at the main event.
For every Alex Pereira, there's a Yusri Belgarui.
Yeah, but that one doesn't count. That dude was more of a friend of Alex rather than.
Nah, bro, I'm playing. He did fight him in Glory though. They're both.
Yeah, like they were like friends. He's like they're kind of like I think the last time I was on your show, bro, was actually an Alex Pereira fight. It was the Sean Strickland Alex Pereira one, and I was on Alex at plus 115. Can you believe? Yeah. We were talking about it. I said, dude, I'm dumping on Alex here. He's gonna knock him out. And then I think Sean, we'll save that for the main event, but as we move on.
Hell yeah, brother. Next up, we got a lightweight contest, and these are 2 guys that honestly, man, I just don't believe in long term, either one of them. I think that when you look at the Hernandez side, cardio, not a selling point. And for me, the ABCs, they always bet on cardio, right? So that makes it very hard to trust a guy like this. You look at the guys he's been able to beat. Yeah, he was able to beat a guy like Jim Miller. That was impressive. He's been able to go the distance with OAM and these guys, but it's always a struggle for him, man. His cardio never looks good. He never looks comfortable. Rounds 2 and 3, they're always a struggle for this guy. And so you look at a guy like Austin Hubbard. I think he's a grappling liability. I've said this before. Joe Solecki hopped on his back and just treated it like a jungle gym, just did whatever he wanted to him, choked him instantly. And that's not a great look. I think Joe Solecki is a great grappler. We know that. But we also know that Joe Solecki hasn't done that to many guys in the UFC. And he was able to go out there and make it look very easy against Hubbard. That being said, if Hernandez does not hurt him early on the feet, does not, go out there and submit him, then he's probably going to get tired. And Austin Hubbard's probably going to have better cardio, especially deep in this fight at elevation. And from what my guy Narco was telling me on his show, shout out to my guy Narco Cop, I was on the Lambo Plays podcast earlier. You guys can check that out if you're interested. But one of the things we discussed is the fact Alexander Hernandez has been training at like a local UFC gym because there's been some problems at Factory X. You know, it's not my business to get into. I don't really know it all, right? But all I'm saying is if the guy hasn't been training in his normal environment, he already shows up to these fights like on an optimal weigh-in, on an optimal camp, on all these things. The guy typically shows up without sufficient cardio to go the full 15 minutes. So that doesn't seem like a bullish signal to me at Chalk ever, right? Like, and now you've got a suboptimal camp against a guy who is basically his whole career is predicated on I'll out condition you, I'll work harder. You know, he doesn't really have any plus level skills. So I think that Hubbard is actually live to finish Hernandez in round 2 and 3 on pure enthusiasm, on pure cardio, on being there. But aside from that, there's not really much that inspires me about this fight. I could see Hubbard getting dominated in the wrestling and just not paying off at a dog price. But I think more often than not, it'd have to be a dog or pass situation here. And I think that when I'm looking at these two guys on paper, it's Hubbard round 2 or 3 in terms of how I would look to play his side on a like big plus money prop perspective, and Hernandez sub at 20-1. Like, I think if Hernandez wins this fight, he could very easily go out there, knock this guy down with a punch early and then hop on his back and choke him. I think he could take him down and choke him. Like, I think he could do both those things. But I think the longer the fight goes, the less likely it is that he wins by any method. You know, he could still win a decision. It's possible, but I don't like guys with bad cardio. I don't like muscle-bound guys that come out there and you know they're going to gas out over time. Then they throw less, they do less, they become less effective, less aggressive. So for me, his best version is him coming out there trying to kill you, and I don't know that he's even going to try that. So that's what makes Hubbard a live dog to me. What do you think, brother?
This one's a little bit hard for me because I used to be a big Alex Hernandez fan, and shout outs to Preston, Jeff Preston pub over there. Preston was telling me the story about when Alex Hernandez went down the Southtown 101 for the first time, and he said it's probably the biggest dick of a person that he ever met in his life, and he just said did not have a fun time at all. And it was just never again. And that definitely probably has translated. I can't imagine if that's how you're meeting with like fans. I can't imagine how your training situations and stuff are like that are going. And you know how training situations go. Like people don't want to train with assholes and jerk offs and stuff like that. That's not how stuff wants to go. Alex Hernandez needs to be like big fish in a small pond type of guy. Like that's how his career kind of needs to go for him to kind of really get there. But I don't know, man. It seems like he's a busted prospect coming into this fight, losing 4 out of his last 5 fights, kind of fluctuating between different weight classes. His cardio wasn't really able to hold up with that 145 weight cut. He has strong wrestling and big punching power, but it just doesn't just all string together consistently enough from fight to fight to fight. I mean, Hubbard's a veteran himself in a second stint in the UFC, but to be honest with you, man, I haven't really been too impressed by Austin Hubbard at all. I thought the Figlack decision was bullshit. That was a controversial one. That was just like one of those ones, like you always say, like if you just saw the two people's faces, but you didn't see the fight, you would say that Austin Hubbard won. But in reality, I thought Figlack did more work. And then being submitted by Kirk fucking Hulabau in the second round is a huge red flag for me. There are some questions kind of leading into this camp. I think he moved back to Illinois to be closer with his family and kids and stuff like that. His cardio would be a huge advantage on paper if he was at his original camp, but I don't know how that works out of like, yeah, the gym that he went to is Coach Strikers, but that shit's not at elevation no more. How does that all work out? Do you think that in your head that you have this this superior cardio? Because if that's the case, and cardio is like, if you threw out cardio in this fight, I think Alex Hernandez would be, I would dump on the spot. But with that being said, some of the market movement and Alex Hernandez's resume and fighting style not really being too reliable, maybe had to pass. But I think this seems like one of the spots where like public underdog Austin Hubbard, people see him, they see his performances and stuff like that. They get in there, they dump. They remember Alex Hernandez has burnt their pockets a lot, but in reality, Alex Hernandez is definitely the fighter they're trying to push in this fight.
Yeah, when I look at this one, man, I just see, a guy in Austin Hubbard. He's got slightly better stats if you look at his striking differential over time. I think Hernandez has fought a slightly better quality of competition. There's just more work from the Hubbard side, right? Like in a fight that was to go long, I think he would probably do more things unless he was getting controlled in the wrestling and the grappling, which I do think is possible. I also think it's possible he gets hurt with a strike on the feet. But overall, I like trusting guys with a better cardio dynamic, with a better work rate. And I don't really trust Hernandez at this stage of his career. If you go back and look, and we're scrolling through Alexander Hernandez's past fights, got outlanded by Damon Jackson 42-32 and gave up 3 takedowns to 0. Against Bill Algeo, got outlanded 110-75 and additionally gave up 1 takedown to 0. Then he outlanded Jim Miller, but Jim Miller is unfortunately ancient, and we love Jim Miller and respect him, but he is certainly past his prime in terms of
It was a good performance, though, man. He gutted it out. Everybody was saying he was going to have a shit cardio, and the cardio looked good.
I'm 98% sure that my article write-up was Hernandez by decision there. I think KO or decision, but it's just because Jim is like a guy that was like pulling guard against Selecki. You know, like he was very tired in most of his fights, but he knocked out a couple guys at the beginning of round 2. And so it gave people hope that he could like keep going. But I'm like, guys, he's 39 and he didn't have cardio before. Like it's going to be really tough. And when I just look at this one on paper, I'm like, Hernandez so many times has just gotten outlanded, gotten outworked. And that I think is always a live possibility. His like quality of opposition has been good overall, but then you just look at the wins, you isolate for that. You can make an excuse for each one of these. Like Jim Miller, a little bit past his prime, caught him at the right time. Mike Breeden, no longer with the company. Chris Grutzmacher, no longer with the company. Francisco Trinaldo, caught him when he was 40 years old. OAM, that's just a good win, right? That was his best win in the UFC by far. And then Beneil Dariush, I think that's obviously a great win and a better quality win. But if you look at that, that's a little more flukish. And if they ran that one back, I think most people would still favor Beneil in an extended fight. So for me, those are the things that make me second guess a guy like Hernandez, especially with the questions about his camp. I find him scary to get behind here, but all respect and best of luck to anybody who decides to get behind him. Anything you wanted to add here, brother?
There's no betting value on any money line in that fight, in my opinion. I guess you could say dog or pass and go with Austin Hubbard, but I don't think Austin Hubbard's good at all. Like at all. I like if you said just pure talent, like sometimes if you dumb it down and just put these two guys in a video game, like who would have a better overall rating? It'd be Alex Hernandez by a lot.
Yep. Although I think his cardio rating would be 2 stars.
Terrible. 2 stars. He's a great video game guy, you know?
Yeah. Come out in round 1 and he's got a highlight reel. I love it. Next up, guys, we've got a women's strawweight contest, and this is going down with Marina Rodriguez taking on Yasmin Lucindo, and Lucindo is just 22 years of age, guys. I do think that she is a bright prospect in the women's side of the game. I liked most of what I've seen from her throughout the years. I think she's shown significant improvement from when she was on the regional scene, but I think we got to put a little respect on the name of Marina Rodriguez. Like, yes, she's 37 years of age, but typically aging out is a little bit more forgiving on the women's side of the game. And when you look at Marina Rodriguez, like she has the rare ability to land shots that alter women's, willingness to keep coming forward. Like she's hurt women, she's stopped women, she's damaged them, cut them up. So I think she does have powerful elbows, powerful punches for a woman of her size, right? Then when you look at her grappling game, a lot of women have tried to submit her. Like her grappling is definitely a deficit in terms of her overall skill set. If she goes against the best grapplers in the division, she will be exposed. But when you look, like some of the best grapplers in the division, period, point blank, Mackenzie Dern, they've had opportunities. They've been on her back. They've been in these spots. They can't finish her. So if Marina Rodriguez is not getting finished in these fights, Jessica Andrade is going out there trying to land these big shots, trying to put her away with the subs. Can't do it. It's like, these are world champions. These are top level opponents. And she's 17-4-2. She's not been losing to any, Tom, Dick, and Harry that comes along in the division and wants a shot at her, right? She beats most people. And so I do think she's at the point where she could age out and she can, have a regression performance and slow down, but she's powerful. She's not like these other girls that Lucindo's been beating. Let's be very clear about that, right? Pollyanna Viana, who I dumped on Baby Shark against her. Why? Because I was like, if she doesn't get submitted from the full guard, she wins. That's the whole fight. I bet Polyana Vieira inside the distance against Jinh Frey because I was like, Jinh Frey is ancient and slow and doesn't have a great chin and never did, by the way. So those are the kind of things where, you always want to be looking at each fight on a case-by-case basis. And I like Lucindo, but let's go back to her UFC debut, my man. I bet Yasmin Waregi huge against her. Yasmin won the fight. It was a little bit close. It was sketchier than I hoped it was going to be. How is that aged? Poorly, right? Everybody else is smoking Waregi. They're knocking her out. They're dropping her 3 times. These women are beating her up. And Lucindo, because she's 22, because she's still growing into her body, she's still young, I don't know that she's doing as much damage. I don't know that she's grown fully into her body. We know that people continue to develop physically, typically, especially on the male side of things. I can't speak as much to the physical anatomy of women, right? But typically until 25 years of age, that's when you could see growth in terms of athletes. They keep getting bigger. They grow into their body. And so I think Lucindo will continue to round out her athleticism as she gets a little older. But she's had a lot of pro experience. She's not an inexperienced fighter by any means. But this is a big step up in competition. This is a girl who's like a fringe, top 5, top 15 type girl. She's been around that level her whole career. And the girls that have beaten her are typically very strong, very physical, domineering grappler types, or they could go out there and compete with her on the feet. And I think Lucindo could maybe compete with her on the feet, but I don't think she's got the upside to go out there and just dominate her on the ground. The submission's like 10.5 to 1. And again, we saw Mackenzie Dern on her back not be able to get her out of there. Right. So really good submission artists have tried, not been able to do it. Cynthia Calvillo got a 10-8 round, wasn't able to put her away, though. That's why it's a draw. She's got 2 draws on her record from women having success, and then she storms back and comes back on them. So I think she's a dangerous woman, and I think right now she's basically fighting for her life in the division. Right. If she loses this fight, she's no longer relevant. If she wins this fight, she gets a big fight next, and she's right back in the mix. She just fought on a huge card on UFC 300. Lucindo is 22. She loses here, no problem. You dust her off. You put her back on the circuit of beating up these women that aren't qualified to fight her, and then she's right there at 25 with a ton of experience in the UFC. This will be a valuable learning experience even if she loses here. So for me, I think the UFC put this together as a litmus test. Yeah, if she goes out there and wins it, sky's the limit, right? Let's see what's up next for her. But it's an assumption right now at -200 in my view. And for me, it's a dagger pass situation for that reason. I've never been a Marina guy. You guys can go look. I've been fading her. I faded her with Amanda Hebos like -300. That one wasn't very wise. But if you look back, Amanda Lemos +200. I was there. Verna Jandaroba +115. I was there. Those are elite grapplers. Those are top 5 girls in the division, top 10 girls in the division, title challengers. These aren't slouches. And so I think Lucindo is good. She has to prove to me she's of this ilk. What do you think, buddy?
Yeah, man. I used to be a big Marina Rodriguez fan, man. She was one of those fighters that you tell your homies about yeah, yo, we're gonna dump Marina Rodriguez. I think that was during COVID when she went on that little streak of fights. But to be honest with you, I don't know, man. I think this is a potential changing of the guard here at the strawweight division. When you look at Rodriguez, she's a high volume kickboxer with a long reach, but at this age, man, I think it's catching up to some of her performances. I bet her in her last fight in April earlier this year, or earlier before the summer, and that was a very closely contested bout versus Jessica Anaraz, where her reaction to the damage was just the story of the fight for me as a Marina Rodriguez backer. Her reaction to just shots late in that fight was the reason why she lost. Historically, throughout her career, her wrestling's been her biggest weakness, but this is a huge step up in competition for Lucindo. She's a prospect with high upside at 22 years old. She's definitely a little bit ahead of her time here, but she's going to have to be dangerous here. She's going to have to go for some stuff that we haven't particularly have seen on tape. It's hard to gauge with the level of competition that she's fighting is what I'm really saying. But I think the career trajectory of these two make me kind of lean that she's still the side here. If you look at the favorites for just women's MMA bouts on the card, though, if you told me between Lucindo and the Penningtons, I think there's a lot more value on the Pennington. So I can understand why people are going to get to the window with Marina Rodriguez. I used to be a big fan, but I just don't see it anymore. That was not that long ago, and that was a huge red flag for me. I think it's changing of the guard here, man. It's just how much value is it on a minus 200 Lucindo when I can get Pennington for a little bit cheaper?
Yeah, man, I definitely get where you're coming from. Like, this to me seems like a kind of fight where I like Lucindo. I respect her. I think she's got a hugely bright future. Like, she's going to go further than Marina Rodriguez, like based on where they're at right now. Like, Marina is not going to fight for the title in all likelihood in her career based on the way it's run out. However, like right now she's fighting for her livelihood, I feel, in this division. And Lucindo, it's not that, right? It's not that high a pressure situation. If she loses here, I really think it's as simple as like, hey, great job. You know, you went out there, you did the thing, you accepted a tough fight. Thank you for doing that, and come back and we're going to put you in the apex, right? Instead of a big show, we'll get you back. We'll build you back slowly. I just think they've got so much time with her. And for Marina Rodriguez, she knows it's go time right now. If you put this Lucindo chick in with Jessica Andrade right now, I don't know that it goes her way. Like, maybe it could. Like, we know Jessica Andrade can be finished at this point in her career. We know that some of her meeting resistance, it hasn't always turned out great. However, we know that she's dangerous. She could go walk a woman down, put hands on her, and put them down. And so we haven't really seen Lucindo get in that kind of firefight with somebody that's durable. Because again, Waregi was out there a little bit shaky with her and started to take a little bit of a, outside kickboxing approach, right? Pick my shots, go combination for combination. And I think that for Marina Rodriguez, she knows I could get in there and throw elbows. I could get in there and throw knees. I can get in there and land punches that change the fight. And for me, that's what makes her a dangerous veteran here. Shout out to my guy, Hype MMA, says, loving the new profile picture, brother. Much love. Trying to keep that consistency, my man. We got it on Twitter, and now we've got it here on YouTube as well to try and make it a little bit easier for people to find the show. So if you guys haven't already, make sure you get subscribed. Make sure you drop a like on the show, and we're going to keep it rolling with a fun fight, guys, that's going down in the welterweight division, and that is what is going to be up next. We're going to start it off with our guy, Billy Briz, and I don't know if you were there last time, but it was certainly your neck of the woods. Joaquin Buckley went out there and did the damn thing, not only against Nursultan Rusiboev, a local guy, a Northeast guy. However, he also went out there and did the damn thing against our guy Vicente Luque in New Jersey, right? He went to Atlantic City and beat a New Jersey guy in New Jersey. So all we can say is hats off to our guy, Joaquin Buckley doing the damn thing. And Wonderboy Thompson on the other side. Sounds so strange to call a 41-year-old man Wonder Boy, but Wonder Man is in the building. He's a plus 180 underdog. How do you see this one going down, my man?
Yeah, Wonderboy's been a fan favorite with such a unique striking style and, decorated kickboxer, all that good stuff. Definitely one of the harder stylistic matchups to have, but, Kryptonite in his career has just been wrestlers throughout his career. Buckley's career change to middleweight honestly has been the best thing for him. He's been unbeaten since he's gone to welterweight 4-0 with an impressive finish over Luque, like you said, and then followed it up with a big decision win over Rusiboev in his hometown. Early on in Buckley's career, he was more content to stay in on the feet and strike at distance. If that's the version of Buckley that we're getting, I think Wonderboy would be a great bet, but kind of dialing it back a little bit, I feel like he's kind of completely changed his game to be more well-rounded and kind of mix it up a little bit with offensive takedowns. And the takedowns aren't like push up against defense. It's more of like open mat takedowns, and that's kind of where Wonderboy struggles. I think the game plan's simple. If he stands and trades, he's probably going to lose this fight. If he wrestles, he could definitely cruise and cover this price tag. But the two things that kind of stand out to me in this fight, if you're on the Buckley side, I like Buckley to win and fight to start round 2 on FanDuel at minus 130. I thought that was a good price tag. I don't think he's just going to smoke Wonderboy in 5 minutes. That's pretty ridiculous. If there was a finish in this fight, it'd probably be like in the later rounds for Buckley. And the same thing for Wonderboy. I like his decision prop at plus 310. That kind of stands out a little bit. Like if Buckley doesn't wrestle in this fight, he's just going to piece him up and win a 15-minute decision, and nobody's going to be like too shocked. Like it's not going to be like, oh my God, what the fuck? Wonderboy just won a 15-minute fight. Like, so seeing it priced at plus 310, I definitely do think there is value on that.
Yeah, we're largely seeing this one the same way, my man. I was talking to somebody very sharp that I respect that is on the Buckley side, and they agreed with me that there was some value on Buckley by submission at 20-1 here. And listen, I know Buckley is not Johnny Jiu-Jitsu, right? If you go look through his career, that's not what you're going to see. But every matchup is unique, right? And one thing that I think you have to realize is, You have a 41-year-old Wonderboy who's trying to get better at the wrestling and grappling. You know what's really hard to do? Get better at wrestling and grappling when you're 40 some odd years of age, right? And when you've got a guy like Rusaboev who's more than comfortable rolling around on the ground, he got held down by Buckley. There was little he could do. Then you go back and look at some of these other guys. And Buckley gets on top of Luca, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, a guy who's had plenty of experience in the UFC, rolling around with these guys. What's his name? Chiesa takes him down, then he rolls out of it and gets a front headlock, finishes the fight. He's a Darce assassin. He's got several of them in the UFC. But then you look at how that fight played out, and he went for a takedown. Buckley squished him with the hips, ran him forward, and then beat his ass and just threw a lot of heavy ground and pound and made him quit. And so he quit and just took the TKO, right? I think of a guy like Wonderboy. What has he shown consistently throughout his recent fights? He's going to give up the back and try and stand up. He's not just going to be content to like lose the fight just like laying on the ground. He's going to try and get up. He's going to try and stand it. And he's pretty good at it. But what happens every time you do that? You expose your back. You expose somebody going double hooks in, riding you flat, going across the face. It doesn't have to be really sophisticated. You don't have to be great at jiu-jitsu to choke somebody in mixed martial arts when you can also punch them in their face, right? So you grab a wrist, you ride it across their face, you start throwing some short shots. They try and defend, they try and cover up, and now you squeeze their head, right? It's again, you don't need a perfect grip to squeeze somebody's head and neck off, right? And again, a guy like Buckley, he's got that big bicep, right? You start squeezing that in somebody's head, neck, and chest, they're not going to feel very comfortable underneath. So I think of a guy like Buckley who's been putting in the time with B team at, Austin, right? He's basically putting himself in more uncomfortable situations, trying to get better at the grappling. And it's because of this matchup. He says to Kevin Holland in the hotel, he's like, yeah, I'm going to go out there and take him down. I'm going to shoot a takedown in the first 10 seconds. Like, what am I going to play around with? Am I going to lie to you? Like, no, I'm just going to go take him down. I'm going to make it look easy. He said, Buck Magomedov. Okay, if it's Buck Magomedov, there's no value on the sub at 20-1. He said, I'm going to go out there and try and replicate these other guys. I mean, Bilal Muhammad, what is the biggest criticism of this guy? He never finishes anybody. Who did he nearly finish? Wonderboy. He had his back. He was punching him a million times. I think if he had went for the choke, maybe he gets it, right? Instead, he was too focused on, like, I'm just going to hit him with this, like, half ground and pound, like, little short hammer fist so the ref didn't stop it. But Bilal hit him a million times, So you just look at this guy. He ends up in the same negative positions every fight these days, right? And you could say it's Gilbert Burns. It's these guys. Absolutely. But what is Buckley? Low to the ground, got a great double leg, and probably going to take him down. So I think that he's going to show his back. That's what happens when you take somebody down on a double. They try and go to their knees and turtle up. And I think that when we see that, it's going to present opportunities. So do I think it's like a lock? Of course not. But at 20-1, I think there's a reason some sharp markets have priced it lower, which is that they're like, no, this could happen. So for me, that's the one thing I was thinking about. Also, if you just saw the success that Shavkat had, Shavkat's a great grappler. We know that. But every fight is fight by fight. Shavkat took what other guys had done and just made it more successful, And so I feel that we could see Buckley try and improve on that game plan against a 40-some-odd-year-old fighter. So for me, that creates some opportunity. And to your point, on the Thompson side, I think the two ways he could win this fight are very straightforward. The KO at 7-1 and the decision at plus 300. And I think that both of those could represent value depending on how you see this fight going. I think that Buckley's a chinny guy, right? If you just look throughout the course of his career, whether it's been true lately, I think you could have your questions about. Certainly at 185, it was true, but he got knocked out regionally. He got absolutely served by Kevin Holland, who got knocked out by Wonderboy, if we all remember back to that one. Weird fight, I'll acknowledge, but just like still the striking tack, Wonderboy was able to get that one done, and it was pretty recent. So then you look at some of these fights and you're like, man, this guy Buckley has been making some improvements. He's been showing off, that he's willing to go out there and change his style a little bit at 170. But we've seen him get knocked out multiple times. I mean, Alessio Di Chirico is like a forgotten name in the UFC, and he sent him absolutely splattered across the octagon, the brotherhood of the traveling head kicks. So that's the one thing I would say is like, I would be a little weary of Buckley minus 2XX against a striker like this, only on the sense that he could get chinned. But I do think that the decision, it's going to be hard for Wonderboy to win it because I think he would have to defend the takedowns. And frankly, I don't see that happening at a high clip. So
yeah, but I couldn't bet I wouldn't want to bet the Buckley decision prop. I do think there is a little bit too much finishing equity out of the Dana White what the Dana White video, this was the second of the prelim fights. There was 4 fights, 2 title fights, and this was the last one of the video. So like I would definitely not rule out the finishing equity on either side here. And that's why it kind of led me towards of like, how do I bet on Buckley, get a better number, but get multiple paths to victory? And that was Buckley to win and fight to start round 2. That's only on FanDuel. If you're on another book, maybe I think a same game parlay would be Buckley to win over 1.5 total rounds.
I'll say this too. My guy Matt in the chat says Buckley beats Ruziboev and now he's going to look like Shavkat or Bilal. That's not quite what I'm saying. What I'm saying is Wonderboy is unfortunately at the position in his career where I don't expect him to be getting better, right? I expect him to be getting worse, not by his own doing, but he's going to try really hard to avoid it. Everybody does, but Father Time is undefeated. And I think that on the other side, Buckley is a guy who's grown into himself. I do think 170 is a better weight class for him. He's too small for 185, right? Like these guys can hit him from too far away. They can hit him too cleanly. But the thing that I will note, my man, is if you go back and look, Brendan Allen had a less competitive fight with Nasruddin Imavov in France than Buckley. So like Buckley has had moments throughout his career where he's gone and shown off the skills against really good guys, but he's found himself undersized. He's found himself not durable enough to hang with the guys at middleweight. But now at 170, I think the cardio has been more disciplined. I think his approach has been more disciplined. You mentioned the wrestling, like that's just getting more savvy, right? And I think that he has shown a lot of improvement. So for me, those are things to note. I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I do respect Wonderboy for sure, but I do, I acknowledge like a guy like Buckley has made substantial improvements. Shout out to our guy Mills. Is that Wonderboy on the left and Buckley on the right? Maybe, just maybe. We're doing the pre-fight one-on-one, you know, the promo, you know, I'm gonna kick your ass tomorrow. No.
Yeah, I thought there's gonna be a little bit more shit talking coming into this one, but Buckley's kind of locked in. I think the conversation with DC on Wednesday really had him a little bit shook. DC really got into him and like really was that's a good little video to watch if you guys haven't followed that little story between DC and Buckley throughout his career.
Hell yeah, man. I was glad to see them squash the beef, you know, because
otherwise
my man DC might have dipped him in the gumbo pot, dude, turned him upside down. I always wanted you know, a little humble pie from our guy DC, you know. People forget this was a light heavyweight champion, a heavyweight champion, you know.
When DC started saying that shit was he said, you know, you get Daniel TV guy, but when you disrespect me and stuff like that, you get Daniel from Louisiana Lafayette. And I was like, oh shit, did he be that serious? Buckley's like his face just goes blank. I was like, all right, Buckley's kind of locked in this week.
Hell yeah, man. I'm looking forward to that fight. That should be an absolute scrap. And that is going to be the prelim headliner, guys. We are moving to the main card. We are opening the main card with a women's bantamweight fight. It is a bantamweight showcase on this main card, guys. If you aren't aware, we've got 2 women's bantamweight fights. We've got a bantamweight showcase in the men's division as well. So it should be fun stuff to break down. And without further ado, we'll talk Kayla Harrison against Ketlen Vieira. There's only one money line side in this fight for me. It's Ketlen Vieira. She's plus 850. It's a women's MMA fight. I mean, what could go wrong? Anything, right? But when I just think about, you know, what side I would be on for Kayla Harrison, who is a minus, you know, 1,200 favorite in this spot, I think the KO is the most value at plus 280. I think people are looking at the sub prop because she submitted Holly Holm. I just don't rate that in terms of Holly Holm's submission defense. She's been submitted many times throughout her career. Ketlen Vieira never submitted throughout her career. Black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, black belt in Judo. I don't think she's a punk on the mat by any means. What I do think is that she does not like to see her own blood. She does not like to be in fights where she gets hit and hurt. And she has been knocked out stiff before by Irene Aldana, and Aldana has power. I think that's fair to say. However, Aldana has spent her career trying to chase that left hook knockout again and never found another one. So I do think Ketlen has a little bit of a sketchy chin. I did not like her reactions in the Yana Santos fight to getting hit, to getting hurt, to bleeding. I thought she looked terrible there, and I thought she was eligible to be finished towards the end of that fight. She gave up bad positions. There have been girls that have gotten on top of her before. I think Sarah McMahon comes to mind. And then Sarah McMahon used to have a self-immolation problem, which bit her in the ass in round 2 in that fight. But you look at this girl's body of work. I think Ketlin's a good fighter, but I was the one singing her praises throughout most of her career, saying like at plus 210 against Holly Holm, like she could definitely win this fight, and she did. Same thing against Misha Tate. I think she was minus 130. Everybody told me no chance. I was like, guys, Misha's coming back off of a layoff and going to get punched in the face really hard by a big Brazilian girl. It's going to go sideways for her at some point if she's not getting takedowns. And then she didn't get many takedowns. I think she had one. So she struggled immensely. I think if this fight plays out on the feet, that's where, the money line looks really stupid, because Kayla Harrison is just not a, world beater on the feet by any means. She's a very average striker, I would say, for WMMA standards, maybe slightly above average, but in the UFC, that's not going to get you very far, right? But her grappling is sensational. Her strength and physicality is off the charts by most standards in WMMA. And I think if you look back, like most of these women have had some success bullying Ketlen Vieira around the fence, but then she uses her technique and her hips and these things to make it a more honest, competitive fight. She's also long and big, but I just think the strength, the pure, like who's going to move who around, I think Kayla Harrison's going to move her around, and I think she's more violent. Like if you said like who is more willing to hurt the other person, honestly, I think it's Kayla Harrison. I think she would just happily put 10 elbows through this girl's head and, leave her a bloody mess and just move on with her life. And I think Ketlen Vieira, if she did that to somebody, would be crying in a heap in her hands. And that's not to say she's a bad person. She's probably a better person for it, right? Like she's a good human being. We'd all love to have this person in our life. But in a cage fight, when you're betting on people she like beat up Misha Tate and then she's crying like, I'm so sorry. I didn't want to hurt you. You're my hero. And I'm like, yo, respect, but like I have money on this fight. Like go punch her in the face and do what you need to do. And if you have those kind of confidence problems from getting knocked out and then lack of aggression, you're feeling bad for your opponent as you're out there punching them. I'll tell you what, Kayla Harrison did not feel bad for Holly Holm. She just beat her up and embarrassed her. That was it. And she didn't care. And I don't think she'll care if she does it to Ketlen. So for me, the KO, the early KO props, that would be the way I would look to play this potentially on the Kayla side. But I do think, could she gas out? Yes. She is cutting a lot to 135. She is fighting at altitude. So those are some considerations. And again, it's a huge money line price. But for me, I think there may be some value on the KO. I certainly think it should be flipped with the sub. I don't think the sub should be, plus 200. That's ridiculous to me.
I kind of do have the same sentiments. Shouts to Mills in the chat, man. It's always good to have people in your circle around you that kind of know you and your betting tendencies and stuff like that. And a couple of things that Mills said to me when we did the show on Tuesday was like, just think back to her PFL career and go through your PFL stats basically with Kayla Harrison. And once I went through the stats of me betting on Kayla Harrison throughout her PFL career, because I bet a lot of PFL. I've been betting PFL since Wiz Khalifa became like part owner, so at least 5 to 6 years for PFL. And Mills was kind of right, man. Like when I kind of look at the tendencies, former judo Olympic medalist, those tendencies have translated very well, especially at American Top Team. That's one of the best gyms to be at, I feel like, for female MMA. For male MMA, it's kind of gone down a little bit besides the heavier weight classes. But she was fighting at 145 at PFL. So her at 135, she's just a weight bully to these girls. And now being able to use elbows and the ground and pound strikes, I just don't see a whole lot of resistance for anyone in this division. She'll be taking on Vieira, but she hasn't fought since last July. She hasn't been the most impressive for me either. I feel like a lot of her wins are getting fighters on the back end of their career. She has the best takedown defense, though, in the bantamweight division right now for active bantamweights for females. So I just don't see her being able to withstand the physicality of Harrison early on. But I do think she gets back up. And her only career loss was against Pacheco in the title fight. But I feel like to beat Kayla Harrison, you need to have power. And Vieira throws volume, but she doesn't have power. And I see Kayla, as she does in every one of her fights, getting her to the ground, getting top control. And I think she just rains down elbows, a bunch of elbows. I'm with you. I like the knockout prop at plus 280. I thought that was absurd value. If you look at some of her PFL fights, dude, she's like minus 300 to the knockout, minus 200 to the knockout. It used to be a thing of like, are you betting you betting the minus 150 on the knockout, or are you taking the plus 100 on the submission? And it was like ridiculous. It was price tags I've never seen before on like finishing props for women's MMA. So with her being transitioned over to the UFC, it's still early on into her like data for sports books. And the one big flaw I've seen between sports books is their data translation from different promotions when fighters translate from either like Bellator or PFL and stuff like that. So seeing Kayla Harrison's knockout prop sitting at plus 1,000 for round 2 is just absolutely absurd. This is one of the fights I'm dumping on this weekend.
There you have it, man. Some agreement on the panel. We both, think Kayla Harrison's going to win this fight. Obviously, the market agrees with us, there. And the KO, has seen some love on sharp markets, especially. You are looking at a slightly smaller Kayla Harrison in this spot, but her strikes landed per minute, absolutely absurd from her one fight with Holly Holm. And meanwhile, Ketlen Vieira, who has a larger UFC sample size by a considerable margin, she has a negative striking differential over her UFC sample. There's been several fights where she's gotten a bunch of takedowns, but she has not landed many significant strikes. So I think there was something strategic about putting Kayla Harrison with this opponent. It's going to test her grappling. It's going to test her ability to compete in terms of the cardio at elevation. All those kind of questions I think could be answered here. However, you have a Ketlen Vieira who's willing to engage in the grappling, who has been outpositioned before by worse fighters like Yana Santos, in my view, especially when she started to take damage. It was a weird fight. She got hit with like a back elbow and started to bleed, but I think Kayla Harrison, could change the complexion of this fight by just causing one cut, right? Like I do think Ketlen Vieira has a negative reaction to seeing her own blood, which is a bad attribute for a fighter, right? So that's the way I see it. I think most of the time it doesn't come into play in WMMA, but I think Kayla Harrison is going to bring that to bear. And, I think that there's a reason why she's gotten the respect she's gotten out of American Top Team for as long as she has. And it's because she can compete with a lot of the men in the room when it comes down to it. So, different sport, I'm not trying to draw that comparison. I'm just saying Kayla Harrison, real deal physically and from a insane pedigree athletically. It's not common to win Olympic medals in mixed martial arts, period, much less gold medals, much less in a sport like judo, which is highly competitive at a global scale. And from the United States, where that is extremely uncommon. So Kayla Harrison is exceptional by every metric, but it's still going to be her toughest test to date in the UFC. So let's see how it shakes out. Next up, my brother. Oh, no, please go ahead if you got something.
No, I was going to say, I agree with you 1,000%. I was, if you ever needed to break down for a minus 1,000 favorite, there you go.
Hell yeah. Next up, my man, we've got a fun one. This is going down, and I've seen the opinion split down the middle in terms of like everybody on Twitter has an opinion on this fight, so it seems, and they're all over the place, right? I'm seeing half the people telling me Kevin Holland at minus 150 is the bet of the century. Like Roman Dolidze, he's too slow, he's too old, all these things. And then on the other side, I'm saying to myself, you got a guy who is ranked at middleweight and light heavyweight against a guy who's moonlighting at middleweight after spending a bunch of time at 170 and having competitive fights. So I do question if this is the best weight class for Kevin Holland, certainly off the rip, but I'm curious, my man, what do you think about this matchup? How do you see this one going down? And ultimately, do you like anything from a betting perspective?
These are one of the toughest ones to bet because I made a lot of money on Roman Dolidze throughout his UFC career. Like for as average of a fighter that I think that he kind of is, he's been plus EV betting on him, man. I mean, 7-3 in the UFC, and you've been getting good spots on him. It's never like anything like crazy. Kevin Holland, on the other hand, I've just been plus EV just betting his fights just in general. I always have a good read on Kevin Holland fights, but this one is one of the ones that I think I'm gonna have to go with my gut here. I mean, Holland is just a fan favorite on the roster, but I just feel like there isn't a fight that he doesn't take at any weight class that they ask him to take, and he's the definition of a company man. And he's staying active, going up the middleweight again. Dolidze has shown that his cardio kind of improved in that Anthony Smith fight. I was highly impressed. I mean, he took that fight on extremely short notice, up a weight class at light heavyweight, and it was a pay-per-view fight, I believe. And he looked good. He does have power behind his hands, and he has a solid submission game. Holland has the clear speed advantage in this one that's kind of giving me like the hesitation, but the physicality and strength is all in the favor of Dolidze. The path to victory would be wrestling. We've seen Holland taken down before by grapplers while his takedown defense has improved, but I just wouldn't put it past Dolidze pulling one out here. I mean, Holland's career's inconsistencies, including with him being taken down and also getting striked at distance and never being reliable. Like, I dumped on Kevin Holland in that last fight at 185 against Magello Zajac, and like that was a terrible bet. Like, granted, like it looks all cool in hindsight when you track it and stuff like that, and like, yeah, it's all good with the clips and stuff like that, but in reality, like, he got absolutely floored, and Michelle's an idiot, and he went right towards his guard, fell to the ground, and got submitted. I just don't think Kevin Holland should be fighting at 180. I just don't think Kevin Holland's best career performances are going to be at 185. I think I just don't see it here, man. I just don't see it here. I'm nervous here to go with Dolidze, but man, I gotta go through this one a little bit more because the market has just not budged at all. You saw Kevin Holland open up as a favorite, then it came down a little bit, and then you see that late steam coming back in on Holland. The bookies have done a great job of pricing this fight because this does seem like a very pick'em fight. Because I think Kevin Holland by decision is very live. Like, if I'm on the Kevin Holland, I gotta decide if I like Kevin Holland, I would like Kevin Holland by decision. I don't think he finishes Rome Dolidze here, but if I'm on the Rome Dolidze side, it just opens up so many more paths to making money, in my opinion. Like, I can bet the money line, I can bet him to win by submission, and I think both of those are very live. Like, I feel like you could bet the money line, still win a decision. Like, there's ways I think Roman Dolidze can win this fight, and I gotta zoom out a little bit because I think Kevin Holland's a trap spot on the main card with the way the price tags are set up. You always see these minus like 1,000 favorites. The favorites either before or right after are always like bookie busters, and that's either going to be Kevin Holland or Joe Queen Buckley. I don't think both of those win this weekend.
Well, I love where your head is at, my brother, and I'm excited to break this one down. If you guys haven't seen on the background here on the screen, we've got my previous betting results on Kevin Holland. I've been betting on this sport, tracked third party since 2021. And if you look back at my results, or actually since 2020, excuse me. But if you look back at my results, my most profitable fighter is probably Kevin Holland. If it's not, it's Tatsuro Taira, but we're neck and neck, right? These are like my most profitable fighters. And I've been there on both sides, right? If you look back, I was on Kevin Holland huge against Darren Stewart. Bad bet, good outcome. Honestly, Darren Stewart, guys, out-wrestled him really easily in that fight. And if you go back and look, Darren Stewart's just a bonehead. So he kind of like left that fight on the cutting room floor. And afterwards, guys, Kevin apologized to him. He was like, I don't know if I really won that one. Like, hey, good job. Like you proved me wrong. I thought you sucked.
The Marvin Vettori fight, bro. Marvin Vettori broke a middleweight record for most landed takedowns in a fight.
Dude, how about this? Okay. Kevin Holland has given up 39 takedowns at 180 pounds and above in the UFC. 39 takedowns.
I feel like I've been on every one of those.
And then you look at this, right? Ronaldo Souza. He was 40 years of age. I just had a feeling that like that was not going to work out for Jacare. I honestly believe Jacare 2 years prior would have sunned Kevin Holland, put him over his knee, slapped him on the ass, and then choked him unconscious. That's honestly what I believe. But timing is everything in MMA. Jacare was past it. Bro, Jacare was literally out there with a smile on his face, like playing around in the full guard when he got knocked out. It's ridiculous. Like the Jacare of old would have like knocked out that Jacare too. You know what I mean? It was just a different
but Holland
guy.
was on a crazy streak that year. I think he won most active fighter of the year. He fought like 4 times in 6 months.
Hell yeah. And he's outperformed his expectations for his own career like already, right? He's done great things. He's won all these big fights. But you pointed out, like last time against Oleg Zajac, was that a good win? Did he justify that minus 300 price tag? God, no. I bet him plus 3XX to win the fight by submission, and he did because I got lucky there that he got hurt, right? He was out there trading with this guy whose only path to win is striking. He doesn't proactively do anything intelligent, right? He goes out there against Wonderboy, a guy that he probably could have submitted in the first round, if we're being fair, right? Between you and me, he could have submitted that guy. But because they're friendly, because he doesn't want to go out there and become a non-fan favorite, he's like, yeah, I'll let him keep standing up. And then he gets TKO'd in the fourth. And then he hurts his hand.
His hand, though. He broke his hand in the
But this is
first
my whole
2 minutes.
point. He sets
Yeah.
back his own career. He doesn't even care about winning. So you have a guy that you're asked to like go out and part with your hard-earned money and not at a even, right? Not at a minus 110, right? Not 11 to 10 like the bookie will. You're minus 150. The privilege of taking Kevin Holland, who doesn't care if he wins and loses, who goes out there, lets every fight slip through his fingers on a split decision. Go back and watch. Guys, I said he would beat Jack Della by split decision. He outlanded him. He could have won the fight. He just didn't do enough. He just let the fight slip through his fingers. MVP got out wrestled and out grappled by Ian Gary, right? Ian Gary said, like, fuck all these pretenses. I'm doing what I need to win the fight. You know why? He wants to win fights. He cares about it. It's important to him. And Kevin, it is an afterthought. He wants the money. He does not care. So I'm telling you guys, if you want to go out and lay it with Kevin Holland, you can. That's your prerogative. But I'm saying, as a guy who's done very well betting on this guy, I could tell you he's 12-4 as a UFC favorite, and you've made 1% on your return. So you've had to go out there 16 times to the window and part ways with your real honest money to get a 1% return, which, by the way, you've already lost on your transfer fees to and from the bookmaker. Okay, so it's gone. He's made you nothing. He's literally just tossed you sweat equity every time, like a half a heart attack every time he goes out there to compete, right? That's what we're dealing with. And meanwhile, on the other side, Roman Dolidze, 3-2 as an underdog in the UFC, 79.6% return on investment. He's been paying you back. If you took some faith in this guy, he's been paying you back. By the way, me and Billy talked about the fact he was underpriced as a favorite when he got to the UFC. It was against John Alon. It was against Lariano Staropoli. Yeah, we'll take him at minus 145 to just run these guys into the fence all night. Sure. And by the way, at 205, at 185, he's doing it to these guys. Anthony Smith is a black belt. He controlled him for 3 minutes on the ground, made no issue of it, right? Against Jack Hermanson, he had several submission attempts, one of which led to a TKO face down on the mat. If he wanted to choke, he had to choke. He's a violent man. He's a vicious person. He doesn't care, right? He's no Ketlin Vieira. He'll smash a hole in your head. He doesn't care. So then you look back, okay, well, he's surely a 0%er on the feet, right? This is what people will have you believe. But here's what I think. I bet Dawkins ITD against Kevin Holland. Do you remember that fight, buddy?
Yeah, that was the headbutt clash that we kind of
they clash heads, right? But what happened? Kevin, after the fight, said in the press conference, he said, I do not feel good about this result because I got knocked out and I got submitted. He literally lost every which way that you could lose. And I know that there was a clash of heads, but how many times in mixed martial arts does a foul go unaddressed and the result is what it is? And you look at this guy, Dawkins, he then fights Roman Dolidze, common opponent. How did that go for him? He broke his face. He was no longer in the UFC. His face was broken by a knee, right? That's crazy. That's rare. You don't hear about this shit. Khadis Ibragimov, not a guy that got stopped with strikes very frequently in the UFC. He's a gasser. That's a big problem for him. What happened against Dolidze? He put a knee to his dome and said, sit down. Like, this guy is literally dangerous, right? Against Phil Hawes, I don't feel like he got any credit for the fact that he did submit Phil Hawes. He literally ripped his knee in half visibly on screen. Then you see Phil jump up, limp away, and instead of stopping the fight, Dan Marigliata's like, all right, get back up. He just calls him up to his feet, and then Roman delivers him in brutal fashion, left him a corpse on the ground. Like, what I've seen from Dolidze is he has knockout power with his hands and his feet. He walked down Marvin Vettori with impunity for 15 minutes, and a lot of people thought on the night he deserved the win as a big underdog. So he's 3-2 as a dog. He could have been 4-1 if you want to give him the Vettori fight. And then you look through, who else did he lose to? Nasruddin Imavov, who's like, what, one win away from a title fight in the middleweight division? Like, we're talking about top guys. And so I do think he's had some ugly performances, right? The Trevin Giles fight wasn't a great look. But he's gone out there and secured 10 takedowns in as many UFC fights. And against a lot of these guys, it would have been harder to take him down. The one thing about Kevin Holland that's been pretty damn consistent, you want to get on top of the guy, you get on top of the guy. Miho Oleksiejczuk got on top of the guy. He's a purple belt that's been training in his garage with 3 of his friends, okay? And he literally looked like he was out on his career talking about retirement. If I lose this fight, which I probably will, in the comments section on videos, he was like, if I lose this fight, which I probably will before the fight, right? That's what he was saying. He almost knocked out Kevin Holland, right? He hurt Kevin Holland badly. So everybody wants to say he's got a great chin. He does have a great chin, but is it getting a little worse? I think there's some room to speculate about that, right? I think that when you look at, all right, he's got, pretty passable submission defense. I think that's true, but I took 14-1 on Derek Brunson to submit this guy back in the day. By the way, I bet him plus 150 on the money line there as well. And then what happened? He locked him in a arm triangle choke for what, 3.5 minutes? Didn't get the tap. Shout out to Kevin, right? Tough guy. He sat there with the answer the phone defense for a long time. But it showed that he could be put in these positions. He could be ran through the series. You could take his back. You could put him in these spots. And Dolidze is very creative. He's not a normal grappler. He's an extremely unique grappler. Hard to prepare for that kind of guy. So I respect Kevin a lot, but not in these favorite price tags for me personally. And I just think of a guy like Dolidze as consistently underrated throughout his UFC run. Like, I know that he's not the world's best fighter. I'm not trying to sell you that he is, but everybody has told me that he sucks since he got to the UFC, and he's mostly won. And also he's finished good guys. Like, he's good. Like, eventually you just have to accept, like, it's like Dricus du Plessis, right? Until he wins the belt and they wrap it around his waist, they'll be like, this guy sucks. Like, and meanwhile, we cash all the way to the bank on those kind of spots. So for me, a ranked light heavyweight against a welterweight washout, like that's with all due respect, kind of the way I see it. So Holland via knockout at plus 440. I get why people would take that shot. They're saying like Dolidze, he's a little slower, right? He almost got knocked out by Imavov. Imavov literally was behind him and punted him in the head as hard as he could. And this guy kept fighting. And by the way, had some moments later. So it's just like, he seems to me like a tough guy who's never been stopped with strikes, who's never been submitted, who's going to go out there and fight hard and wants to win. And he's against Kevin Holland, who's like indifferent about whether he wins or loses the fight. And he's been submitted. He's been stopped with strikes. Like, I don't know. It just doesn't, I'm not buying this. This doesn't pass the smell test to me.
It does not pass the smell test. And then I was, the one note that I have from Dolidze's media day, it's kind of hard, with Georgians talking English, but the thing that he said was like, yeah, maybe I get submission this weekend. And I said, okay, noted. And then once the domestics came out and looked at the sub prop, I mean, we're sitting there 14-1 by submission. Inside the distance is sitting at plus 550. It just seems like, yeah, Kevin Holland's faster, but does faster warrant laying minus 158, or am I going to dump on an underdog and go chase some big plus buddies? Because there's a lot of ways I feel like Roman Dolidze could cash some crazy props. And some of the fights that we'll talk about, like Jose Aldo and Julianna Pena, and Khalil Rountree, those are all like liabilities on the card. Like, nobody's betting Roman Dolidze on the main card as an underdog.
I tend to agree with you, my man. He's certainly less well-known than a guy like Kevin Holland. And I think people remember what they saw last. And the last thing they saw is Kevin Holland cashing the sub prop. Me and you were there, right? We cashed
up Donald Trump.
We took
Donald
the money, but I literally made
side,
a mental note.
Jumped over the
night,
cage.
I was like, yo, Kevin is shot right now. Like, Kevin is not the wave right now. Like,
it's just wild, though, because you are right. People are going to remember what they saw last. And Kevin Holland got the submission over Michelle Lucic on a big pay-per-view, jumped over the cage, clapped up with Donald Trump. Donald Trump hugged him, and that's a lasting memory in people's brains for sure. Say what you want about Donald Trump, but I definitely do think the public market is definitely skewed on this one, because it's like, if Kevin Holland should be this big of a favorite, then why is the line just staying still? Like, the bookies are like, yeah, we'll come get your Kevin Holland money. Big mouth it all up. And I don't know, man. I gotta go back into this a little bit more. But Roman seems like I'm not gonna. I gotta sit with this, but I really do think Roman is the spot here. It's just, man. Jeff Bruno says it in the chat, quarter unit Dolidze by sub. Like, you don't have to invest a lot to make a lot on the Dolidze side, but I feel like on the Holland side, you have to invest a lot to make minimal amount, like you were saying. So it's like, I think Roman's going to end up being a bet for me here.
One thing I wanted to note here, guys, is if you look back, my Kevin Holland predictions over time, I predicted him to win via submission against Michal Oleksiejczuk in the first 2 rounds. I predicted Michael Venom Page via knockout 1 or split decision. I predicted Kevin to beat Jack via split decision. He lost via split decision. I'm pretty sure that I had, in fact, I know for sure I had the sub 1 against Chiesa. I literally wrote Anaconda in the breakdown, like Darce Anaconda series. And then that's exactly what he did. Guillotine from far away. And then against what's his name? If you go back, I don't have it listed here. Like I ran out of options. These are all my previous write-ups, by the way, in my navigation doc. So anybody can go back and look for themselves at what I've thought about these fighters previously and get a long-term perspective on my thoughts on them over time. But just looking at these guys, like I've basically been right about the vast majority of Kevin Holland fights over recent memory. And that's why I don't want to overthink this too much. It's like I had a very strong read on this one just off the initial booking. And it seems like there's a lot of people willing to get on the other side in the market. So those are the kind of spots where I typically just trust my gut. And I think this is a live underdog opportunity. I think there'll be opportunities to play Kevin in the future, but against old guys, against guys that don't want to be there, that's who I like to play him against.
Yeah, I'm not walking up to the window with the value boy ticket. That's not really my style. I'm just trying to win some bets, go on to the next sport or whatever the next day. And the screams like value boys are coming out here. And let's go Dolidze. I gotta grab a computer charger, but I just don't get it. Like, what are you doing with the Kevin Holland line? Like, you're just laying the -160 and just moving on, just saying like it's just chalking it up, or like. If you're like Kevin Holland, I think you bet Kevin Holland by decision. I thought that line was pretty generous. Kevin Holland by decision was sitting at +175.
Fair enough, my man. Definitely a path to victory. I think the most likely would be the KO or decision for the Holland side of things. But next up, speaking of KO or decision, we got Jose Aldo Jr. taking on Mario Bautista. And certainly the experience, the championship pedigree is going to be on the side of Jose Aldo Jr. He's the older fighter here at 38 years of age, and he's taking on a 31-year-old Mario Bautista in the prime of his career. However, this is a huge step up in competition for Mario Bautista. If you look at his recent run in the UFC, he did defeat Ricky Simon. He did defeat Damone Blackshear, but those were both somewhat competitive decisions, right? I thought the Simone fight was more clear than the Blackshear fight. I thought the Blackshear fight could have went either way, and the Blackshear fight was on short notice for Damone Blackshear. So you saw that he was supposed to take on Cody Garbrandt, huge opportunity in his career, instead takes on short notice Damone Blackshear, and he did get the win. But his other wins, Guido Canetti, Benito Lopez, Brian Kelleher. I honestly think if you lined up all three of those guys, Jose Aldo would finish them all, one round after the other. If you gave him the opportunity, right? That's genuinely my belief. Jay Perrin, same story. I don't think he's going 15 minutes with Jose Aldo. I think he's taking a seat, so those are my thoughts on his level of competition. Now, it's not all about the level of competition. You could always try and project somebody's talent and say, is this a person that I think could win at the next level? And I think for Mario Bautista, he's a solid fighter, right? He's not a bad fighter, but I don't think his durability is all that. He's 1-2 career to his UFC knockdown rate. That's not great. Aldo is like 11-3. He's knocking people down. He's hardly gotten knocked down, and he's been fighting the best guys in the sport for as long as you could think of. He hasn't been submitted since 2005 as a professional. That's insane, right? He's been fighting forever against the best guys at 145 and 135, and no one is submitting him. Merab Dvalishvili taking down every UFC opponent except one. His name is Jose Aldo Jr. So what is so special about Mario Bautista that he is favored to beat Jose Aldo? That for me is a question. Like, I'm seeing that maybe I'm on the public, Mark-ass Buster side. Like, maybe this is just a stupid read by me and I'm going to get barbecued. But I'll just say, last time out, I felt the exact same way against Jonathan Martinez. I was like, listen, I respect Jonathan Martinez, but has he ever shown me he's on this level? No. Has he been knocked out by guys like Davy Grant? Yes. So, like, if you're getting knocked out by Davy Grant or Trevin 5-Star Jones, are you really chalked out to Jose Aldo at any stage of his career? And that is a question of mine, right? I think Mario Bautista is a good fighter with a good pace, and I think he could go out there and beat a lot of guys. But the guys that have stopped Jose Aldo with strikes inside the first 3 rounds are who? Conor McGregor and Max Holloway. Does he remind you more of those names, or does he remind you more of, the guy he just dispatched of in Rio? He reminds me more of that guy, right? He reminds me more of a Pedro Munoz and a Rob Font and these other guys, by the way, all better names than anybody that this guy's beaten. So you look at the Jose Aldo run at Bantamweight, and he's got a list of 4 or 5 solid wins, good UFC wins. This guy's got 5-6 fight win streak against passersby, hangers on. And I don't mean it to be disrespectful. We're just trying to pull out the distillation of facts here. And I think Aldo proven more against better guys, period. I think that he could get chinned. He's 38, right? We know that the knockout rate goes up at 38 years of age. Maybe he gets clipped. I will say Bautista is a little bit more willing to box than a guy like Jonathan Martinez, who's willing to kick all night, right? And I thought that was a terrible style against Aldo, who checks great kicks. But do you really want to box with Jose Aldo? You want to find out how that goes? Like, I think Aldo's the better boxer. So if they get down boxing, I think Aldo wins. That's just the way I see it going, man. And I always want to trust my reads. And the way I see it is just the wrong guy is favored here. I think it should be a pick 'em price. And I think Aldo, if not, should be slightly favored based on the quality of competition and his recent form. But it is at elevation. He did lose to Merab despite defending all 16 takedowns. So maybe we get a Mario Bautista, leg hump against the fence. That would be really disgusting and disappointing. But, I don't foresee that happening at a high enough clip for him to be favored here. How about you, buddy?
Yeah, I think you handled the analysis of the fight just in general pretty well. I don't have anything more to add. I would just say more about the market discrepancy on the total was just very wide between the sports books of like where you can find fight goes to distance or how they're pricing the finishing props for this one. And it just seems like a trap spot for ITD here. I don't know. When I'm looking at the different boosts and stuff like that, like for example, Bet365 has Bautista to land the most significant strikes, him to win under 2.5 plus 900. I feel like if you bet the exact opposite of that, of Jose Aldo to win, him to land the most significant strikes and over 2.5, that sounds like a cashing ticket. And this is another thing that popped out for me was when I was doing my daily fantasy projections for this fight. I thought there was a little bit meat left on the bone for fight strikes landed market for Jose Aldo. Maybe you're on Prize Picks or something like that, Underdog Fantasy. 50 plus strikes for Aldo was the sportsbook line at -188. That seems very fucking low. 75 plus 110. I think this fight goes to decision. So it's probably going to land somewhere between that 50 and 70 range. So there's a little bit of value here on strikes landed. You can do that as like a little same game parlay with Aldo, maybe boost it up a little bit. There's definitely ways to get onto this fight. While I thought early on in the week I was going to pass on this fight with just being a public underdog, with the way MMA betting kind of opens up later on in the week when the domestics open up, like same game parlay opportunities and different props and stuff like that. There's a lot of ways to get down on Jose Aldo, I feel like, in this fight and him still win by decision. You just got to do a little bit of due diligence to see like what your book offers and what markets and stuff like that. But there's a lot of interesting markets on the main cards of pay-per-views. And I think Aldo is going to win this one by decision.
Fair play, my man. Honestly, my contrarian take here is I think Aldo's going to knock him out. I think when you look back, I think Mario Bautista is a good fighter that doesn't have the best durability. And I think when it was tested early on in his career, that's where he faltered. Trevin 5-Star Jones is not known for being a knockout threat. You could go look throughout his career, guys. It's just not his thing. And meanwhile, Jose Aldo had Jonathan Martinez doing the Macarena because he hit him so hard in his last fight. It literally shook him to his core. And I think that when you're looking at this kind of matchup, Jose Aldo is still swinging with vitriol every time he fights. He's boxed. He's done all this stuff. He knows how to throw proper strikes and land them hard. And this guy has gone down to body shots before. He's gotten folded up before in the UFC. So he's a tough guy and he's in good shape and he's probably on the right steroids and all these things. But if Aldo hits you, between the ribs, it's probably going to be a short night at the office, right? And guys like Renato Moicano that deserve all the respect they're getting right now for going out there and putting on these, fantastic performances at 155. This guy got smoked by Jose Aldo at 145 too. And a lot of other good guys and a lot of other great fighters you've heard of, they got smoked by Jose Aldo too. So I think when you look at the body of work, just Jose Aldo has the ability to knock this guy out, and 11-3 to the knockdown over his UFC career. And meanwhile, this guy 1-2. So I think he's been going against grapplers and looking good. And I think he's about to be in there with a real striker that can make him, we'll find out what his level is, right? And if he's on the level, I'll take my hat off to him. But I don't think I've seen evidence that he is. And the last time I saw him tested like that, I saw him get put down bad. So I think the same thing could happen here against a legend and a veteran and a guy who's looking for some redemption in Salt Lake City. Last time out, it didn't go his way. He got cage pressed by the champion, and now he gets a guy from a little bit further down in the rankings. So I think this is a great spot. And also, shout out to Tron. He says O'Malley fits perfect too. Absolutely, right? If he's able to get one over on O'Malley's teammate, his boy here, maybe that's enough to coax out, O'Malley for a big fight with Jose Aldo in the future. That would be kind of cool to see. But there's your featured bout of the evening. Anything you wanted to add there, Billy, or should we move along to the co-main event?
I feel like we did the due diligence for that one. Even if you're on Prize Picks or Underdog Fantasy or something like that, there's a lot to be had for that one. If you think there's going to be a knockout, I would even play the fantasy score for Jose Aldo on Prize Picks.
I love where your head's at, my man. I'm looking right here at the next fight, which is Raquel Pennington, Rocky, taking on Julianna Pena. And I will say, Salt Lake City's been good to Rocky in the past. Rocky Edwards was able to go out there, put that head kick that rang out around the world, cash me a nice plus 310 on Leon Edwards, plus 450 on Leon Edwards inside the distance. Never in doubt, right? 5th round knockout, never in doubt. But you look at the Julianna Pena side, right? Huge upset against Amanda Nunes, one of the biggest upsets in mixed martial arts history, plus 700 underdog. I remember there was something that flashed on screen. Somebody bet $330,000 on Amanda Nunes. And then, somebody with a black briefcase approached her in the back and said, "You're going to gas out in 6 minutes here." She did. That was the end of that. And then she rematches, she runs it back, and she's able to get the jump on Julianna Pena in a big way. Here's the questions that I have coming into this fight as I kick it to my guest, right? You've got a Julianna Pena who's been out for a very long time. So what version of Julianna Pena is showing up? I think that's an open question. But here's the other thing. We've got a Austin Thud Hubbard who's training out of Valley Flow Striking Academy. You know who else is? Julianna Pena. And she has been for a long time, right? She was Sikh Jitsu as well. But who's in her corner for this fight? Bilal, remember the name Muhammad. And one thing about Bilal Muhammad, guys, is you remember he used to look one way, and then he looked a completely different way, and he was now physical, and he's grabbing people and throwing them around the cage. I think that Julianna Pena, for a girl who's been out as long as she has been, which she has been out for a considerable amount of time, she looks very physically strong, right? I'll just leave it there. But I'm curious, what are your expectations for the Julianna Pena that we're going to get in this fight? And then how do you handicap her chances to get it done against the champion, Raquel Pennington?
Yeah, this is one where I had to really sit back and just think just a little bit deeper into it. And I just feel like Julianna Pena is a trap spot. That career win over Amanda Nunes, she's always going to warrant and garner public attention on the betting prices, especially at plus money, with people having that memory in their brain, either being on the Pena side or either being on the Nunes side. And Rocky Pennington isn't a household name, I would say. You see Pena, she used to do the show with Conor Burke and stuff like that. She's a more familiar face. She's going to garner more tickets at the window. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to overthink this one. I think Raquel Pennington can win this fight in plenty of various amount of ways. Outside the Kayla Harrison fight, this fight has the highest chance of going inside the distance. I feel like Julianna Pena just gets clipped. She can get submitted. I think she can lose a decision. I just see there's just a lot of paths to victory here for Raquel Pennington. It's just when you look at the price tag of minus 168, it's now we start playing the game of would you rather, if I had you with would you rather bet Cesar Almeida by knockout at minus 180, or would you rather bet Raquel Pennington on the money line at minus 180? It's when you start doing that, it's just all right, well, hands are folded, bookies, you got me. This is a Raquel Pennington spot, but I probably won't be betting it. But I do have a little D-Gem parlay here, just for the fam. You got to ride out with the fam here on this one. A little Pennington parlay here this weekend. I feel like that's the only way I could get behind Raquel at a number that I felt comfortable enough. I got that parlay at plus 148. It just a little sprinkle, nothing crazy, but This is a spot for them, man. I feel like both of them have a lot to prove here in this one. And Raquel's hearing the rumblings of how she's a boring champ, and there's other girls in the division like Kayla Harrison, Raquel just shows up every day And I just know what I'm going to get out of her. She's going to fight hard. She's going to fight for her money, and she's about her business. I don't know. It feels like Julianna Pena's been on a little bit of a more gimmicky shit. I'm not really a big fan of her, and I'm probably going to end up fading her in this spot. Depends on how the market shapes up. Depends on how much I end up dumping on this one, but I like Raquel. I think she's a side here in the title fights.
Yeah, this is a tricky one for me, man. I'll level with you. I thought that Mayra Bueno Silva was going to win the last time, right? And watching it back, dude, she has no business not winning that fight. Like it's honestly disgusting that she lost that fight, even in hindsight. Because when you look, like Raquel, she did everything she needed to do to win, right? But only because only because Mayra gave her every option, right? Like Mayra came out in round 3 and just was gassed and gave up. Just like was pulling guard, like just giving up bad positions, like basically conceding the fight. And she still had a couple moments where she would take the back or go for a sub from her back and these kind of things. But that was it, right? She just resigned herself to like, either I will get one finish from one opportunistic submission or I lose this fight and that's it.
If you remember, though, she was way too emotional. She was crying and shit. She had her mom like cage side and stuff like that. Her emotions were not in check.
Yeah, and overall, it was just like she blew it. Like that's just the plain and simple language. Like Rocky didn't do that much great. Mayra blew it. And now you have Julianna Pena, who is slightly younger, despite being out for a while. She's a year younger or so than Raquel. I do think Raquel has the better situation coming into this. She's had 8 rounds of action since Julianna Pena last was in the fight, right? And I think that you look at a girl like Pena, how does she respond to a huge beatdown like that from Amanda Nunes? Open question for me. How does she respond with so much time off? Open question for me. It's a 5-round fight at elevation. People are telling me her cardio is good. Is it though? She gassed out horribly against GDR. Horribly, dude. Like was ready to give up and then GDR put her to sleep. So I think that when you look at her run, it's been very hit and miss. But I do think there's a chance she's on new supplementation. I do think post USADA, people have made changes, right? Like people have just looked different. OSP, prime example, right? Goes from looking like one guy who can't take a punch to another guy who could take a punch and fight for 15 minutes, which he hadn't done in 4 years. So you just start to look at some of these athletes and have questions. And I did think Pena looked fantastic on the scale. I did think Pena looked very confident in the face-offs. But I also think when you look at activity, what is it best for? Cardio, right? Activity keeps your cardio in check. This girl, Raquel Pennington, trains at elevation. So I wrote up this fight already for Roto Grinders. I did a full card preview. All this stuff is available for channel members. By the way, guys, I posted all my research I was showing before, the previous performance and odds range, all of that information as well posted on the channel for those that are interested. However, if you look at my write-up for this fight, I said that I think it's Pennington in rounds 3, 4, 5 decision, that kind of deal, or it's Julianna Pena sub in round 1, 2, or 3. Guys, if you're giving your back that easily over and over to Mayra Bueno Silva is not a bad grappler. She's talented. But how is she submitting people in the UFC? Arm bars off her back, the ninja choke standing. That's what she's doing. She's not having a great time taking everybody's back and, muscling them around on the ground. And Raquel Pennington not only got her back taken, she got her back taken again. She got her back taken again. It happened over and over again. In round 1, it happened twice. In other rounds, it happened, again. So it's just like there was a lot of danger that she survived there, in part because Mayra is a massive gasser. And so I think that if Julianna Pena and her coaches commit to, hey, let's go out there and kill this girl in the first 2 rounds by just putting a choke on her that puts her to sleep, she has that capability. She has the wherewithal to do that. And she also has the zombie mode to just walk forward and take the damage. On the back end, though, I think she takes too much damage. I think the fight with Amanda could have been stopped. She's very tough. She's willing. But what did we just see from Benoit Saint Denis? He's tough. He's willing. They stopped it on him, right? They didn't let him have the chance. And I do think Julianna Pena in her last fight got busted up so bad that if it's in Utah and not in Vegas, this is the kind of fight that could get stopped on a doctor's advisement as well. So I think that there's maybe value on the fight not to go the distance. I think both of these women have a chance to finish one another. And ultimately, I think ABC say always bet on cardio. So I would favor Raquel here, but not by a huge margin, just because the weaknesses are very glaring for me on the Raquel side. You've seen other women take her down, put her in bad positions before. She's just always been tough and, willing to keep fighting through those spots. But at 36, with injuries mounting up. She had a surgery not that long ago herself. I do think there are some red flags on her side, despite being the champion.
Yeah, last thing I'll add to this one is you remember when we used to do the Pub Sports Radio live streams and stuff like that. It always creates a good opportunity to like get an idea of how the night is going. And one of the scenarios that I have built out for the stream is if Kayla Harrison fight goes to decision, if Holland goes to decision, and Aldo goes to decision, and we get to the Pennington Pena fight, and that's the next fight, and all the other fights have gone to decision, and there's like 5 or 6 in a row, I'm definitely betting no distance on this fight at plus 168. But it would have to be like a particular scenario where like it screams like there could just be some finishes left on the card or something like that. Overall, I think there's a lot of decisions on this card up and down, but it still doesn't deny the fact that some of these ITD props that are listed in this fight are just a little bit ridiculous. Like Raquel Pennington submission plus 460. I mean, when you have a championship fight, you just open up yourself to so much more plus money opportunities with the round props and stuff like that. Like, I can't imagine, like, I'm looking at it right now. The Raquel like submission combination props on FanDuel is just ridiculously high odds. Like Raquel to win by submission in rounds 2, 3, or 4 plus 850. Like, goddamn, man! Like, you guys are pulling my heartstrings. I'm like, depends on how the night goes, but there's a lot of ways that you could play this fight. If this fight did end up going inside the distance, there would be a lot of plus money opportunities on either side. Pena by knockout would be sitting somewhere at 11-1 odds. Her to win by submissions plus 650. Her to win by decisions plus 300. Like, there's a lot of ways to get plus money on this fight, but I think Raquel ends up just winning by decision, and they nerfed the market.
Well, there you go. I think it's one thing, you know, to be in the prime of your career and actively competing and go 5 rounds. But for Julianna Pena, I do think 5 rounds is a long time to go when you haven't been in there for a long time. And she's gassed out in a 3-round fight before. So just a couple of things to keep in the back of our mind as potential angles. But yeah, Raquel's not a proven finisher in that way, but she does have 3 submission wins in the UFC, and she was damn near submitting Mayra Bueno Silva in round 5 of her last fight. She didn't have quite enough energy to squeeze that head and arm choke, but she had it all but secured. So I do think that the trends say Raquel Pennington, hard to ignore, as a favorite, 7-0 in the UFC, 56.6% ROI. Julianna Pena, though, bolstered by her win over Amanda Nunes, 3-3 as an underdog for 116% ROI. So the better return on investment has been Pena, but you're not getting the same plus money odds as you were against Amanda Nunes at plus 800 or whatever it closed there. All right, guys, let's do this thing. The last fight of the night, we've got the main event of the evening. The card is built upon this fight, right? This is the reason we're all here. Alex Poatan Pereira against Khalil Rountree Jr. This should be a fantastic fight. I'm very much looking forward to this contest. Billy, why don't you start us off, my man? What do you got on the main event of the evening, and how do you see it shaking out?
Yeah, this one isn't I just can't reinvent the wheel in this one here. Like, it is what it is. Like, it's a fun fight. It's a very entertaining fight for the fans. It's a striker versus striker matchup. And while I definitely do think Khalil Rountree has a puncher's chance, I just, at the end of the day, like, this is just simple to me. I think Alex Pereira just ends up knocking him out. This is an Alex Pereira spot. I'm not going to get too crazy with it. I'm not going to dump on the money line and go in on the parlays and stuff like that. It's not one of those situations for a title fight. You're definitely paying a price tag. So, I mean, I've bet Michelle, whew, that's when you know it's late. I bet Alex Pereira damn near every one of his UFC fights, besides the Jamal Hill one. And all the price tags have been like somewhat manageable. This price tag just seems a little bit price prohibited, but when I really start digging into the layers of the matchup here, I think he's going to knock him out. It might not be what everyone thinks in like the first fucking 2 minutes of the fight, but his knockout prop on FanDuel was sitting at knockout prop in rounds 1, 2, and 3 for Alex Pereira was -150. That's the way I'm going to end up getting in on this one.
I think this is a fascinating fight. I want to just say apologies. My internet decided I had enough there and just closed out all my existing tabs, including StreamYard. So that's why I disappeared from the broadcast for a second there, guys. Apologies. But I did get the gist of what my guy Billy is saying. I do think most people are expecting Alex Poatan Pereira to be the, A side in this matchup. He's clearly the face of the UFC in a lot of ways right now. But there's a few things that I want to note coming into this contest. First and foremost, 37 years of age for Alex Poatan Pereira. And you had kind of noted, like, you've been on him every fight in the UFC. And if I could guess why that is, it's because he has historically been very closely lined with all his opponents, right? You look at a guy like Alex Poatan Pereira, and I'll just level with you guys. I've been bad at betting Alex Pereira fights, right? I did bet him against Strickland, right? So I've had some good moments. I bet him at the +115 tag. I bet Israel Adesanya both times against him. So one time I lost a boatload of money, right? And the other time I won some money back. What's that?
He already fought in Salt Lake. I remember the last time he fought
against Jan Blachowicz. And by the way, that fight could have went either way. That fight easily could have went to Jan Blachowicz. And it's not just because of the grappling. He did get, out grappled for the first round and nearly submitted in that fight. But then in rounds 2 and 3, it was very competitive striking minutes. And why? Because he got wrestled in round 1. And so then he was a little bit more fatigued than normal. So he just went to a decision, a close competitive fight. And Jan Blachowicz was taking his shots. He's a 40-year-old man. He's a tough guy. He's got a good chin on him, but he's a 40-year-old, right? He's taking some good shots from Pereira and holding up. So here's what I think. I think Khalil Rountree has, for a long time, not been my favorite kind of fighter. I never was a big fan of the guy. It's just, wasn't my cup of tea, right? He's a primary striker. I'm a guy who likes my wrestling, my grappling in terms of what I gravitate towards. So I've never been all about the Khalil Rountree, experience, but here's the reality of the situation as I see it. You've got a very powerful, dangerous guy on the feet in Khalil Rountree. His knockdown ratio is legitimately absurd. Like, if you look at his knockdown ratio, he's been fighting in the UFC for, however long since he got here in Tough. I think it was 2016, right? 13-1 is his career knockdown ratio. 13 knockdowns. He's absorbed 1 in the UFC. So he got dropped by an elbow, I think it was in close from Johnny Walker and put down against the fence. That's the only time he's been knocked down in his UFC career, was from a massive elbow from a guy who's 6'7", right? And then if you look outside of that, he's knocked down 13 people. I have people telling me Khalil is a fake good striker. And I'm like, is he though? How do you knock down? How do you record 13 knockdowns and just be all right? Just be okay. He's clearly a very dangerous striker. Gokhan Saki, right? They line up, and I'm not saying that this is the same fight. I'm not trying to make that parallel, but Gokhan Saki is a really dangerous guy, right? If he connects on you, he's probably going to knock you unconscious, but he just never did because he was already asleep. He was already down. He got hit too fast. Khalil hit him first. Khalil's a dangerous guy, man, and he comes out fast. So I just think when you look at a fight like this on paper, I think to myself, okay, 37-year-old champion already. I'm keeping my hands clear of that. I've been there fading Usman when he was 35 and over. I was there fading Shevchenko at 35 and over. It doesn't work out every time, right? Some champions are exceptional, but most often it does work out. Tyron Woodley and Shevchenko, there's been a handful of exceptions over 35 years of age. For the most part, it doesn't work out for them, right? And so you have a Pereira who is not only doing something that is already super rare, which is winning all these fights in a row, winning all these title fights, winning the rematch. He's doing all these impressive, rare things. But then what has happened to the market? We went from -120, +115. That's what he was in every fight, basically. You go back and look, except for the first couple fights in the UFC against, what's his name? Poor bastard. He got kneed into the shadow realm.
Oh, my God, that was crazy.
Michailidis. Andreas Michailidis, right? So you look and these guys, yeah, he was a big favorite against some of them early on. But for the most part, if they were a guy with a pulse, if they're a top 5 guy, if they're a guy ranked in the top 10 at light heavyweight, he's been -110 at best, the -120, -130, -140. He's not going above that, right? If you want to find the last time in his career that he was a minus 400 favorite or more, it was in the LFA. He was not even a UFC fighter yet. This was pre-2021. So he's gone on an excellent run over 3 years. But he was literally in Salt Lake City, right? A few years ago, near pick'em price with Jan Blachowicz, who's a 40-year-old man. So it's like, are we saying to ourselves that Khalil Rountree is just useless, right? He's just going to go out there and just be fodder. It's like, but why necessarily? Because we thought Yuri Prohaska could go out there and mix it up with him on the ground a little bit, right? We thought he could go mix up the game plan. It didn't work out for him. But his defense is more lax than Khalil Rountree. And his like wrestling and grappling is, just as proactive, right? It's not what he looks for. He's going out there to strike. So it's like, okay, you've got a guy who's going out there to strike. That could be dangerous. But also, it's light heavyweight. We just know that the better guy doesn't always win. Sometimes it's the guy who connects first. Ryan Spann and what's his name? Dominic Reyes. Would we all agree that even if they ran it back, like probably still Dominic Reyes is favored to win the fight? He got sparked, absolutely out cold instantly. And then he went back and won his redemption fight. Now everybody's back on the train. It's like, it's light heavyweight, dude. You get hit one time, you get all, thanks for playing. It was a fun memory. And what we know is Israel Adesanya froze him once, right? Like he hit him in the first round of their first fight in the UFC. And Alex was like time traveling, looking off into the distance in MSG. And his corner like shook him and was like, hey, buddy, you're in a fight. Woke him back up. And he responded in kind, did everything he's supposed to. But he's had a lot of fights where he's going back and forth and he's exchanging some shots, right? It's not like he's afraid to get hit. He's willing to get hit and throw back with you. So it's like, you're going to give Khalil maybe some chances to land. And like, they're both going to exchange. This is one guy with a 6-1 knockdown ratio in the UFC against a guy with a 13-1 knockdown ratio in the UFC. And people want to tell me one guy can't shut the other guy's lights off. I'm like, no, they could both absolutely go to sleep here. So for me, my write-up, my official prediction on this fight was either guy by knockout in round 1 or 2, or the fight goes the distance. That's kind of the way I see this going. I think either they're going to start hot and somebody's going to get killed because they're throwing with too much firepower, too much intensity, southpaw against, orthodox. I think the lead left hook is there. I think it's a possible knockout shot for Alex. But I think Khalil has some of the most vicious body kicks I've ever seen in terms of when he gets guys to the ground and he soccer kicks them in the body. It's ridiculous. And Pereira hasn't really been tested in fights where somebody is physical as he is, throws him around a little bit. And what if Khalil grabbed a hold of this guy in the clinch and threw him to the ground? Him and Adesanya were like going back and forth in these clinch exchanges. So for me, I think that if you said to me, Liam, who should be the favorite in this fight? That's an obvious answer. Alex Pereira. But should he be minus 450 or should it be more like those other fights where he was a favorite? I don't think Khalil deserves the shot, right? If you ask me, Liam, you're the matchmaker. Khalil's not here, but it is what it is, right? He's here and you get the prices you get. So if you ask me, would you lay minus 450 against Pereira or on Pereira? No, that's the answer. Like, no, I simply would not. I've seen him taken down. I've seen him nearly submitted. By the way, a guy who didn't make it through the contender series, right? Kamel Otani, I was very excited about him. I wanted to watch him. He didn't go out there and fight Cody Steele. He said, anyway, this career is not for me. Thanks anyways, Dana. Shook his hand and left. So that guy went out there, submitted Alex, walked through his punches and knocked him down. He's a lightweight. Like,
yeah, that was before he went.
People have these absolutes in MMA. I just say to myself, like, I've seen this sport enough to know Julianna Pena beat Amanda Nunes. Is she better? No. What should Amanda Nunes have been minus 2,000? No, because it's a stupid sport. It's a crazy sport. And I mean this from a place of love. Khalil's never been my guy, but he's 5-1 as a UFC underdog. He's made 105% return on your investment. So if you look at those facts, you say to yourself, man, this has been a pretty damn good guy to bet on. On the other hand, 6-0 for Alex Pereira. Something's got to give, right? Some regression has to happen. But one guy, your ROI is tiny, and his paths to victory seem like I could go out there and knock him out. Maybe I could win a decision. People are talking about his submission as being, super advantageous this week. I'm not sure that I see that, but okay, I guess anything's possible, right? He could attempt a guillotine or something like that, but it's like, you've got a Khalil Rountree who's probably the more like credentialed guy on the ground, right? He's been around MMA for longer, period. He's beaten guys that kickbox before. It's not like he's going to be scared. So I just have a feeling like this could turn into a much more honest fight. And here's the other thing is I think either guy could knock each other out early. But what happens if this fight goes to full 25 minutes? Would I make Alex a small favorite? Yeah, he's been in like these long kickboxing fights. I think his cardio has checked out. But at 37, that does open up some questions about how does his chin, which has already been flashed in the UFC, hold up? How does his cardio, which already looked dicey the last time he was here against Jan Blachowicz at elevation, how does that hold up? And I think those are both open-ended questions. So I just don't have as much confidence as the market in a guy who I think is a stand-up kickboxer that has a decent ground game, like passable, but not exceptional and not a huge takedown upside. So he seems to me like a guy who's should be favored in the striking about a minus 250. That's what I think. So for me, at plus 3XX, that's the way I see it, man.
I kind of agree with Nunya in the chat, though. That's kind of the vibe I was getting a little bit here of. It's one of those ones where, like, it depends on your style of betting. If you're a style of better where you bet like 5 or 6 underdogs on a card, yeah, you got to throw Khalil Rountree in there, but it's not like it's like usually for this type of market, you would think there would be like a big parlay liability for Alex Pereira, but there's really not that much of parlay liability. Like they're really getting Khalil Rountree tickets getting placed at the window just as much as they're getting Alex Pereira parlays and Alex Pereira submission props and shit like that. You know how many times I've seen Alex Pereira by submission throughout this week? It's ridiculous. The market has absolutely collapsed. Like the bookies have just done their job correctly. They booked the market correctly to get action on both sides in a fight that people don't think that's that competitive, to make it kind of seem like it is competitive. But to be honest with you, I just think Pereira rolls here in this one. He can get it done by decision. I'm not too worried about the cardio. The cardio problems were because he was cutting way too much weight. It was like damn near cutting off of like 3 ribs for him to get down to middleweight.
Blachowicz is at 205.
Yeah, the Blachowicz fight was 205, but that was also
Salt Lake City.
But he had a legal situation going into that fight where he was getting like sued for something like that. There's a lot of stuff in his personal life. He had the girlfriend and shit like that. He was just getting money. He just bought a new house. Like there was a lot of like situational things where you go from like UFC fighter to like stardom and stuff like that. There's always a little bit of a transition with that, but I thought he handled that fight accordingly. That was one of the spots that I dumped in, and I sweated, but it wasn't that bad of a sweat. But that's also a different price tag. There's just not really much to really play here. I get why people would go to the Khalil Rountree side, but just think it's just simple. Like Alex Pereira just probably knocks him out, but hopefully it's later so we get better odds on it.
Best of luck, my man. I will say the one thing I will not be on is Alex Pereira this weekend. I think if anything, I'd be on an under or something like that. But yeah, I just think it's been prohibitively priced, right? It's like minus 270 for him to win by knockout. And, I do think that's a lot of his win equity, but I certainly don't think that you're getting value at that kind of number. It's like 75% almost implied. And I just think that that's about accurate, if anything,
if you're going to play the knockout outcome, but it's, if you're going to play the knockout prop, you're going to have to tie it to a round specifically. A couple of years ago, when I was with Gorilla and we're at his house in Connecticut, it was just one of those spots. Like we knew Alex was switching weight classes and it was a dump spot on Israel Adesanya, but we didn't know how to like bet the Adesanya side. And Gorilla was just like, fuck it, dude. We're just going to go $300 on every round prop because he's going to get finished. And on the later rounds, bring it down a little bit. And it was just one of those type of dump spots. And I feel like it's the reverse type of like dump spot. Like I feel like I'm just going to dump on the round props and just hope it's the second or the third round and go a little bit heavy on those.
Again, my man, best of luck to you. But this one, I think if I get anywhere, it'll be on the Khalil side. So we're going to see this one slightly different, but that's why we always say there's more than one way to skin a cat. There's a bunch of different profitable ways to try and back these fight cards. So always pick your spots, use your strengths and weaknesses. My strengths typically are underdogs, but I know that my guy, Billy, he's a guy who's in the lab, right? He finds these lines where it's, like you said, the SGP, whatever it is, to play the bookmaker against themselves. Nothing better than that, my brother. So love to see it. And I do think the way to target Alex to get specific, right? If you have a big favorite, that's always the way you're going to try and buy down, get onto a prop that makes more sense. And I think that for Kayla Harrison, right, overpriced money line, but the KO still may hold some value. That's kind of the way these markets work. You got to look at them case by case and specific detail by specific detail. So I hope that you guys have enjoyed the program. If you have, do me a couple of quick favors. First and foremost, go ahead and drop a like on this show. It's an easy way to show love and support, and I really appreciate it. It helps other people find the show, and it helps YouTube know that you guys enjoyed it, and that's always big for me. So thank you guys. Also, if you don't mind, get subscribed to the channel. Guys, my goal is 4,000 subscribers. I've been doing this for too fucking long. I've been doing this at too high a level for too fucking long to not have 4,000 subscribers. So me asking you personally, please, go ahead and hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. If you're on Twitter, go ahead and get your ass on the YouTube browser and go ahead and hit subscribe because it means a lot to me. I'm trying to get this to 4,000, putting in the time, effort, and energy each and every week. This will have timestamps. This will have all that on the back end. But that's how I'm going to ask you guys to show a little love on the return. Just hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way. My brother, Billy, please let the people know where they could find you. Are you guys going live tomorrow? All the great stuff you got going on. Let them know and where they could get the packages, my brother.
Hell yeah, man. You got to come back to the live streams, man. We got to send you the invite to you. I'll send you one person. We got to get you on for a fight or two. The people been asking for you. They said, where's Liam? We need Liam in the chat. But yeah, you can find me over at Pub Sports Radio over on X at Getting Bills. This is the time of year to be a sportsbook gambler. It's the sports equinox time of year. I mean, every sport possible is going on right now. WNBA playoffs, NFL football, NCAA. It's just so many markets to crush right now. NBA preseason, NHL just came back, MLB playoffs. There isn't a sport right now that you can't make money on. So when it gets to this time of year, I get a little bit more picky and choosy here in UFC because there's just a little bit more meat left on the bone. If you want to see where the plays are at, follow me over at Getting Bills over on X. And a lot of the stuff is free, man. Like the basketball plays that I gave out today, WNBA game, total 150, smoked it. Game finished like 25 points over the total. And then NBA preseason basketball, 10 o'clock game, Timberwolves over the Lakers, 4-point line, minus 150 money line. That was a 30-point win. Like it's the best time of year. College basketball isn't even here yet. So make sure you guys get tapped in. There's a lot of sports out there to make money on, so you can flip-flop. But this is an MMA program, and you guys got to go support my boy Liam. So we could make sure you guys hit that bell notification. Read that Roto-Grinders article tomorrow. There's always good nuggets in there.
Hell yeah, my man. I appreciate the plug. I appreciate the support. Our guy, Charlie Z, says he's going to get subscribed. I appreciate you, Charlie. I hope everybody else takes your lead. If you guys are looking for more information from me, first and foremost, you can always find it down in the description below. Tried something new this week. A few people had said, Liam, I'm trying to get signed up with a membership on YouTube. I said, okay, I'll set it up. So we're going to see how it turns out. All the information that I make available on Patreon is available on YouTube for members now. So if you guys want to go ahead and show a little love and support, that's the easy way to do it. All the documents we've referenced during the show. And I can just show you guys real quick before we get off the air here. There will never be a skimp out on research, right? What I can't guarantee is results, and I never do. I never bullshit you and say like, oh, I win every week, or I'm a genius, I get everything right. But what I will say is there's very few people that put in the same amount of work. If you go and look through, I make these 4 documents at the top proprietary each and every week. What will also be there by the morning time tomorrow is my prelim preview as well. So every fight on every card for the UFC previewed in detail. That is what I have. The performance and odds range, how they've done previously. I have it every week for these fight cards. The A-side report, who's big on social media, who's moving the needle, who does the company care about? I'm establishing all this information, and then I'm going back and compiling all my previous write-ups on these fighters, all my fight tape documents. You can go through and look from all different points in their career. This is back when he fought Cesar Almeida. I could show you guys, right? Cesar Almeida against Alex Pereira. I have round by round kickboxing notes from back in the day. This is the kind of shit that I do that most people will never do. And it doesn't mean I'm going to win every week, but it's the kind of things that I try and do to give myself an advantage, right? To set myself apart from the market. So I take a lot of notes. I believe in a few simple phrases on this show that we've been saying for a long time, that we've been preaching for a long time. Note takers are money makers. Lifelong learners are lifelong earners. So each and every week, I'm learning from the sharpest chat in the game. I'm putting together a ton of notes. I'm going back and reading through my old write-ups. I'm going back and watching the tape. and I'm doing my very best. And that's what we're going to do each and every week. God bless you all. I hope you enjoyed the show. Come back next time. We're having all the same fun again. Thanks, everybody, and good luck on all your positions. See ya.